Lord of Mysteries, The Arrival of the New Black Emperor by Huo Yang. Chapter 226-250. The middle-aged man, over 30, had large ears and looked somewhat comical. He was a young man the Tamara family had focused on cultivating over the past decade, already a sequence 5 at just over 30 years old. His name was Bennett Tamara, and he was also the person in charge of secretly investigating the disappearance of the entire team in Backland. His two subordinates, who had been tailing, recounted their recent experience, speaking over each other. In fact, they had noticed the previous day that someone seemed to be watching them. Tonight, they finally confirmed it. Their first reaction was that these were helpers Hobbert had found, and they had been exposed. However, what happened next completely changed their perception. Bennett asked, "That lawyer said he wanted to report you." "Yes," one subordinate replied. "So, the other two were also tailing." "That's what we think." Bennett stroked his chin in thought. Who could have sent them? "We checked yesterday. That lawyer is a famous lawyer who recently offended many powerful figures." "Could they have sent someone?" "It's possible," Bennett continued. "Are you sure he said he wanted to report you to Mechanical Heart, not the Night Watchers?" "Certain," Bennett said. "It seems we can indeed rule him out. Since he's a famous lawyer, he'd be watched by many eyes, making it difficult to act stealthily." Most importantly, Bennett analyzed that the Night Watchers must have also been involved in the operation to destroy the Tamara family's team, so the suspect they were looking for must have a close connection with the Night Watchers. However, out of caution, Bennett still instructed, "Find time to investigate that lawyer's beliefs." This investigation wasn't urgent. He added, "Today, we discovered another stranger who appeared on Rose Street the day the incident occurred. Tomorrow, you two will track him." The other two tailing individuals took a carriage to the West District. The experienced coachman circled a building a few times, ensuring no one was following, before dropping the two off at a luxurious villa. The owner of the villa was a Backland businessman who often conducted business in the Fenaport Kingdom. Because he frequently relied on the Fenaport government, through communication with his business partners in the Fenaport Kingdom, he often provided convenience to people from the Fenaboat embassy. Ambassador Tim happened to be a guest at the villa today, so he personally listened to the report from his two subordinates in a reception room. After hearing the details, Ambassador Tim said, "I understand. You no longer need to track Hobbert." According to the clues Tim had previously obtained, Hobbert was a member of the mercenary club and had channels to receive bounties for two cultists. For a long time recently, Hobbert had not shown any abnormalities, and it could be definitively concluded that he did not know the third person who died at the textile factory at that time was a Fenaport businessman, or rather, an intelligence officer. However, after Ambassador Tim returned to the banquet, he suddenly thought of a detail that seemed very wrong. According to intelligence, Hobbert seemed to be closer to the Night Watchers, but why would he go to Mechanical Heart to report? Also, as a wild Beyonder, shouldn't he try to avoid being affected by battles between other Beyonders? Why did he actively approach? Ambassador Tim realized that this matter could not be concluded yet, and he needed to find an opportunity to probe this young lawyer. "Mr. Ambassador." The villa owner's words brought Tim back to reality. Should we go enjoy some violin or piano music?" the villa owner politely asked. Tim smiled and stood up, saying, "Digesting delicious food with music is a pleasant experience. Mr. Ambassador's taste always leaves us far behind." Hobbert overlooked one thing. Although the four people tailing were foolish, the people behind them were all shrewd. His seemingly very wise move until now had actually left some flaws. However, neither Bennett nor Tim took a Sequence 7 very seriously, so even after having some suspicions, they didn't pay too much attention to the matter. In any case, Hobbert was still very safe for now. After using True Sight to confirm that no one was tailing him, Hobbert immediately took a carriage to the suburban freight train station. Only after watching the coachman drive away did Hobbert climb into the train station. Grov was a guard at the freight train station. The freight train station stopped operating externally after 6 p.m. Trains would still depart or arrive afterward, but no more business would be handled. The train station had several large cargo warehouses and many tracks, with idle or spare trains and carriages parked. The entire train station was very large. To prevent thieves from sneaking in at night, in addition to fixed guards at the cargo warehouses, there would also be guards like Grov who would patrol the train station every hour at night. Grov smoked a rather worn-looking pipe, held an oil lamp, and tightened his clearly ill-fitting coat. The late autumn nights in Backland were already quite cold, especially the foggy latter half of the night. After a patrol, his hair would be covered in dew, and if he didn't wipe it off quickly, he could easily get sick. Today, as usual, he patrolled his regular route. Suddenly, Grov saw a light ahead. He tapped the ash from his pipe on a nearby carriage. "You little rascals, don't let me catch you." Many street children would climb into train carriages to spend the night, avoiding the police and the cold wind. Usually, Grov would turn a blind eye, but if someone was making a fire in a carriage, he would have to stop them. Whoosh! Grov had only taken 2 steps forward when a sinister wind suddenly swept through the air. The lamp in his hand almost blew away, and the surrounding carriages were also moved, making creaking sounds. "That's eerie," Grov said, a little hesitant about whether to continue forward. Whoosh! Another gust of sinister wind came from ahead. As Grov tightly wrapped his coat around himself, he saw an abandoned small locomotive slowly rising amidst the sweeping wind. Grov's mouth fell open, thinking he had seen wrong. He rubbed his eyes, raised his lamp, and the small locomotive had already risen more than a person's height, but it suddenly stopped there, as if it couldn't fly any higher, and then slowly descended. Whoosh! Another strong gust of wind, and the small locomotive slowly rose again, this time even higher, stopping only when it reached about 30 feet over 9 meters before slowly descending again. At this moment, Grov seemed to realize something. He held up his lamp and looked into the air. He couldn't see anything in the dark night sky, but he always felt as if something terrifying was crouching in midair. That terrifying thing seemed to want to devour the small locomotive in front of him. Suddenly, that oppressive feeling disappeared, and the firelight ahead also vanished. Everything returned to normal. The small locomotive lay quietly there, and the surrounding carriages were motionless. Grov stood until his legs stiffened before muttering, "That's really spooky." As he said this, he walked backward, refusing to turn his back on that small locomotive. He dared not come out to patrol again tonight. The next day, rumors of a haunting spread from the suburban freight train station. Late at night, Hobbert emerged from the train station and walked 2 or 3 streets before hailing a hansom cab. He had just tried, and if he only used the power of the country of disorder to grab it, he couldn't pick up the small locomotive at all. Based on his estimation, that small locomotive should be slightly heavier than a water pump, which is why he used it for the experiment. If he held the Black Emperor card, the small locomotive could be picked up a little, but only a little. In the third experiment, Hobbert held the Black Emperor card while distorting the weight of the small locomotive, and he could already grab it near the gate of sacrifice, but the last few meters just wouldn't come up. With these 3 experiments, Hobbert believed that if he became a sequence 6, he would be able to complete this operation. Looking at the street outside, which had already begun to fog up, Hobbert decided that as soon as he thoroughly digested the Briber potion, he would immediately drink the corrupted Baron potion. After becoming a sequence 6, Hobbert planned to first digest the potion in Backland to see if it worked. If not, he would go to the South Continent again and, with the help of the Bach family, find a territory to try acting. In addition, Hobbert had already used the country of disorder to decompose that corrupted Baron extraordinary characteristic. He did not intend to consume too many extraordinary characteristics. The reason is simple. With order wood and uncontrolled stone, his strength in the Black Emperor pathway was already very strong, so there was no need to consume more extraordinary characteristics. Consuming more extraordinary characteristics would put too much burden on his spirit and require him to spend energy to redigest the excess potion, which would not be worth it. Byam, late at night, in a narrow alley. Alger, wearing a hood, always held a crystal scepter in his pocket, entering the depths of the alley with high vigilance. I heard you were looking for me. A hoarse voice echoed from the darkness deep in the alley. It was Byron, Held General's intelligence officer. Yes, I have a piece of news to sell you, Alger said coldly. News? Have you reported to your master? Alger sneered. I believe that after you hear this news, you will immediately report to your master, no, your lord. Byron in the darkness snorted, speak. A ship laden with gold, silver, and jewels has secretly set sail from the south continent. Be specific. Alger, however, didn't fall for it. It is said that the value of the goods on board is over £200,000. First, tell me what price you can give me. £1,000. Too little, I want 1/10 of your gains. Byron sneered, are you playing with me? Are you playing with me? Alger also sneered, I have other channels to sell it. Even if I report it to the Storm Church, they won't give me only £1,000 as remuneration. Byron snorted, is the news accurate? Absolutely accurate. Go to the bar ahead and have a drink, I'll give you an answer in a moment. Alger knew that the other party was going to report to Held General, so he nodded and went to the bar. Although it was late at night, there were still many reveling pirates and scoundrels in the bar. They chatted loudly, and their voices could be heard from the street next door, but there were also many such bars on the street next door, and they also had such loud voices. These two bars' streets seemed livelier than a vegetable market. Alger ordered a glass of local Blue Mountain Island fruit wine and waited for about half an hour before a young man dressed as a local politely invited Alger back to the previous alley. Byron was still hiding in the darkness, but his tone was much kinder. Alger, you're in luck. The captain is prepared to give you £3,000 as remuneration. Alger reluctantly said, all right then, consider it a favor I'm selling you. If it were anyone else, I wouldn't sell this intelligence for such a low price. He noticed that two people had come up behind him. Aside from increasing his vigilance, he did not make any aggressive moves. Long time no see. How about I treat you to a meal? I'll also cover your accommodation, and if you want a girl, just ask, Byron laughed. But please don't leave the room I've prepared for you. I know the rules, Alger also smiled. There's no need to explain it so clearly in such a disgusting tone. Confining Alger was partly out of fear that the information was wrong, and partly to prevent this kid from selling the same information to others again. Thursday, Backland, Blanca Street. Hobbert, who had returned late last night, slept until past 8 in the morning. After eating the breakfast Furs left, Hobbert returned to the country of disorder and used true sight to confirm that no one was tailing him. Then he put on his windbreaker, picked up his cane, hailed a carriage, and first went to the ruined Kingdom Military Staff Headquarters to tell Christine that he knew a Death Pathway demigod of upright character, and he wanted to take that demigod to explore a ruin. Hobbert completely trusted Christine, which is why he decided to give her a heads up. As expected, Christine only told him to be careful. As for the ownership of the sealed artifact, she didn't even ask, completely leaving it to Hobbert to handle. Then Hobbert hailed another hansom cab and traveled for over an hour before arriving at 16 Wanbo Avenue, Hilton District. Wanbo Avenue is an avenue on the outskirts of Backland, where there are many self-built villas. It is a concentrated area for the wealthy who are almost at the millionaire stage but still have a little distance to go. However, 16 Wanbo Avenue is special. It can be seen from a distance that this villa has been abandoned for a long time, and the vegetation has almost swallowed the entire courtyard. After a simple inquiry, Hobbert learned that this villa was very sinister. People who moved in often died inexplicably. No one dared to live there a long time ago, and some Black Knight goddess priests had come to exorcise, but still, no one dared to buy the place. In other words, it was a haunted house. Living here would perfectly fit the identity of a Death Pathway Beander. As for those Black Knight goddess priests, they were probably night watchers. Even if there was something sinister inside, it had been dealt with before. However, it's hard to say now, as Mr. Azich has made this his stronghold. It wouldn't be right for his identity if no ghost stories happened. Hobbert had already written down the general process of exploring the ruin and his conjecture that it was what attracted Mr. Azich, and, as Mr. Azich instructed, he put it into the mailbox at 16 Wanbo Avenue. He had no intention of exploring this villa. In the mysterious world, one must listen to advice. If told to put it in the mailbox, then put it in the mailbox. Then Hobbert took a hansom cab again and left, preparing to return to the law firm to wait for news. Unexpectedly, just over 10 minutes after the carriage departed, the space next to Hobbert suddenly became illusory. As he watched in surprise, Azich stepped out of the illusion. "Take me to that ruin." Hobbert smiled. The last time they met, both of them had acknowledged their Beyonder identities. So Azich was not hiding his extraordinary powers at all now. Hobbert said, "Of course, but I hope I can also get some extraordinary items from the ruin." Although discussing terms right away might seem rude, it was reasonable and logical to clarify certain matters from the start, especially since, from Azich's perspective, this was only their third meeting. If there were no personal interests driving Hobbert, Azich would instead suspect his motives. "I am only interested in the hard feathers you mentioned," Azich said. "You can have everything else." Mr. Azich grabbed Hobbert's shoulder. "Recall the location of the ruins in your mind." "Wait." Hobbert took out a 2-Soule banknote and placed it on the car seat, then said to the coachman, "I want to get off." Otherwise, the coachman of the rented carriage would definitely think he had seen a ghost. A perfectly fine passenger just vanished. After hearing Hobbert's voice, the coachman immediately stopped the carriage by the street. He waited for a long time but the passenger didn't get off. "Sir, sir." He went to the back to look, but who was still in the carriage? Fortunately, there were 2 Soule for the fare in the carriage, which made him think he hadn't noticed when the passenger got off, and he didn't think of anything else. Meanwhile, the coachman's passenger, Mr. Hobbert, was being held by Mr. Azich's shoulder, traveling through the spirit world. The spirit world had dazzling colorful mist and various forms of spirit world creatures. What Hobbert found most novel was that his feet were not on the ground, he and Mr. Azich were in midair. To be precise, the spirit world did not have the concept of ground. There was no concept of up, down, left, or right, or even distance. Although they seemed to be standing still, Hobbert knew that if they left the spirit world at that moment, they would have already moved far away from their entry point. Before entering the spirit world, Mr. Azich had warned Hobbert not to make eye contact with any spirit world creatures. Hobbert kept his head slightly lowered, observing everything around him only with his peripheral vision. Suddenly, Hobbert saw an ancient black coffin in a mass of black mist. It stood upright, seemingly having noticed Hobbert. Although there were no eyes on the coffin, Hobbert realized that it was staring intently at him. Hobbert averted his gaze, not daring to make eye contact with it. Just then, everything around them seemed to be splashed with paint, becoming abstract and unreal. These abstract and unreal colors gradually solidified, and Hobbert saw them transform into trees and rocks, weeds and mounds of earth. At this moment, they were already on a hillside in the suburbs of Backland, from where they could see the camp at the foot of the mountain. That was the Jacob Mercenary Club's camp. At this time, they had already transported away all the valuable antiques, but there were still more than a dozen people finishing up. They first filled in the entrance to the ruins, and then began dismantling the encampment. Mr. Azich asked, "Is this it?" "Yes," Hobbert said, "it's probably directly below." Then Hobbert felt his vision blur, quickly covered by darkness, and they had already arrived inside the ruins. Hobbert gave a wry smile. Do all big shots like to be so lazy? If they can use the spirit world, they won't take the normal path. Hobbert had prepared in advance, turning on his flashlight and leading the way. Yes, at this very moment, Backland already had flashlights. The reason it was called a flashlight, and not a torch, was because its shape resembled a table lamp carried in the hand. Its main structure was a large battery, with a circular forward shining light in the middle, and a handle at the very top. The overall structure was a cuboid, so it couldn't be called a flashlight tube. Currently, Flashlights did not yet have a civilian version. Hobbert had purchased a military version from the mercenary club, which was very heavy. Not only could it illuminate, but it could also be used as a weapon, at least much more effective than a brick. For Hobbert, this high-tech product had two flaws. The first flaw was that light bulbs had to be changed frequently. Light bulbs had already been invented, but their quality was very poor, with most bulbs only able to work for 100 hours, so they needed frequent replacement. The second flaw was that it was expensive, because the light bulbs were not only poor quality but also very costly. However, when Hobbert saw the flashlight, he still bought one. No, it was 1 unit. Because the vision provided by the flashlight in the dark was much better than an oil lamp, and it was windproof, rainproof, and could also be used for self-defense, making it much more versatile than an oil lamp. Of course, Hobbert thought that after he became a high sequence, his body would undergo a qualitative change, allowing him to see things clearly in the dark without a light source, but that was a story for later. Carrying the impulsively purchased flashlight, Hobbert arrived at the noble courtyard within the ruins and pointed out the entrance to the underground structure to Mr. Azich. "This seal is very exquisite," Mr. Azich said with a smile, and as he spoke, he raised his hand, and the seal, which Dofus had put a lot of effort into, was thus easily broken with a light tap. Then the two of them lifted the stone slab. Mr. Azich went first, followed by Hobbert, entering the underground structure of the ruins. Mr. Azich instructed, "When I tell you to close your eyes in a moment, you must close them immediately." The terrifying memory in Hobbert's mind was reawakened. He swallowed. "Okay." After walking along the underground corridor for a full 20 minutes, Mr. Azich suddenly stopped and said, "I know what's going on. This door usually hides itself and constantly changes its position." Saying this, he took out a small dagger, cut his finger, squeezed out a drop or two of blood, and evenly smeared it on the stone wall. The stone wall immediately became illusory, revealing the shape of a door and emitting a chilling glow that made one feel cold all over. Mr. Azich said, "Close your eyes." Hobbert immediately closed his eyes, and that pervasive feeling of terror and oppression reappeared. However, the immense oppressive feeling only lasted for about 10 seconds before Mr. Azich said, "All right, you can open your eyes now." That's it. Although he had doubts, Hobbert still trusted Mr. Azich. He opened his eyes and first saw a bizarre door before him. Inside the door stood a creature taller than a man, with a dog's head and a human body. Its eyes were tightly shut, its body covered in black fur, and the expression on its face was very kind and reassuring. Just seeing this face could bring peace to one's mind. This image was very similar to Anubis, the Egyptian death god, in Hobbert's memory. "This is a black hound spirit beast," Mr. Azich explained. "Seeing it reminds me of some knowledge. It is said to be a guardian of the ancient death god, and its heart is one of the main materials for the ferryman of the death pathway sequence 3. However, the state of this black hound spirit beast is very strange. First, it contains the complete sequence 3 feet ferryman, extraordinary characteristic, and it has already died. Or rather, no one can completely kill it, because it is already dead." Mr. Azich paused and then said, "However, I can use the power of the underworld to extract the extraordinary characteristic from its body. It will no longer possess terrifying power, only retaining this state of not decaying and slowly moving freely in its death state. But my spirituality tells me that if I borrow a large amount of power from the underworld here, it will trigger very terrible consequences." Hobbert asked, "Is this a zombie or a living corpse?" "It's a different state. It will not rot until the end of time," Mr. Azich said. "I suspect it was blessed by the ancient death god." Azich waved his hand again, as if dismissing a servant, and the black hound spirit beast, with its eyes tightly shut, moved away from the doorway. Hobbert saw what was inside the room. The stone chamber was much larger than he had imagined, and a giant bird lay within it. His spirituality immediately made him realize that this giant bird was extraordinary. Although its eyes were tightly shut and it had no signs of life, it still impacted Hobbert's spirit. However, this impact was not enough to cause Hobbert's spiritual body and astral body to collapse. Its appearance somewhat matched Hobbert's idea of a phoenix, but it lacked colorful feathers. Instead, its entire body was covered in what looked like pale, flame-like feathers. Hobbert then noticed that the brilliant, illusory colors at the entrance had all turned gray and white upon entering the stone chamber. Even the light from his flashlight, when shown inside, seemed to be covered by a thin black veil, turning gray and white. Sadness. Hobbert felt the sadness brought by death. Finally, Hobbert's soul was shaken. Yes, shaken. How could such a marvelous creature exist in the world? Azich quickly stepped forward and placed his hand on the giant bird's corpse. He closed his eyes and sensed for more than 10 seconds, then pinched his forehead in some pain and said, I remembered many things. Azich opened his eyes. This is the corpse of ancient death god Gregare. Well, more precisely, it's the undying part of her corpse. This isn't a complete mythical creature form, so we didn't die immediately upon seeing it, we only experienced some impact. Hobbert's sense of shock still lingered. Why is her corpse here? I recalled something. During the Four Emperors' War, Azich chuckled. You can assume I read relevant documents. No, I know that's something you experienced, Hobbert thought to himself. Azich continued. In the early stages of the Four Emperors' War, the Night Emperor and the Underworld Emperor each gained an advantage, so the Night Emperor set his sights on the Underworld Emperor. For this, he found Gregare's corpse, which had intricate connections to the Underworld, hoping to use it to set a trap for the Underworld Emperor. Unfortunately, the Underworld Emperor hadn't even stepped into the trap when the Night Emperor fell. The Underworld Emperor once secretly sent people to search for it, but Gregare's corpse was never found. I didn't expect the Trentsust family to hide the corpse here. Hobbert finally understood why his spirituality had prevented him from using the teleportation statue when he was exploring the ruins earlier. It was because the ancient death god not only contained the uniqueness of the death pathway but also a portion of the extraordinary characteristic of the door pathway. Therefore, the door to this stone chamber was not as Dophus had guessed, overlapping with another stone chamber, but rather it could randomly appear anywhere in the underground structure. It was estimated that the entire stone chamber was a space created by the ancient death god using the extraordinary abilities of the door pathway. As for why the stone chamber kept circling within this underground structure, Hobbert hadn't figured it out either. He guessed that this underground structure might be a kind of seal designed for the stone chamber. During the previous exploration, if Hobbert had used the teleportation statue, he would most likely have been constantly teleported into the stone chamber or to its entrance. Hobbert asked, can the ancient death god be resurrected with this corpse? Azich shook his head. No, but this is a symbol of the ancient death god's immortality. As long as the corpse exists, she still has the possibility of resurrection. Even if a new death god has appeared, she still has the possibility of resurrection. Then can't this corpse be destroyed? No, even deities can't destroy it. Azich said. Just like that blackhound spirit beast, it's already dead, how can you kill it again? Hobbert remained silent. For the first time, he felt the immense shock brought by this mysterious world. Before, he always felt that he knew everything about this mysterious world, but it wasn't until today that he realized he only knew about it, but lacked the understanding and insight in this regard. Only by seeing the most mysterious and high-end parts of this world could he truly form his own understanding. The two stood before Gregare's corpse for a long time before they went to examine the other structures of the stone chamber. There were 3 corpses in the stone chamber, all in skeletal form. The clothes of one of the corpses had decayed, but the skeleton was still remarkably well preserved. This should be related to the environment here, or being near the ancient death god's corpse. Of the 3 corpses, only one had an extraordinary characteristic emitting a cold light beside it. Not far from the corpses, there were 2 black iron-like cylindrical objects. On one of the cylindrical objects, there were also 2 items that looked like either notebooks or books. Hobbert immediately realized something was wrong. The ancient death god's corpse only attracted one Beander from the death pathway. And it also attracted 2 ordinary people. Azich shook his head. No, over 1,000 years, it should have attracted many beyonders from the death pathway, but some could restrain their curiosity and desire, while others could not. Those who deluded themselves into studying the ancient death god's corpse all died here, while those who could restrain themselves picked up their extraordinary characteristics. As for the corpse with the extraordinary characteristic, its clothes still show no signs of decay. He should have died here in the last few decades or even a dozen years, and his extraordinary characteristic has not yet been picked up. Hobbert nodded, then looked at the 2 black iron-like cylindrical objects again. He remembered stumbling over something hard when he first entered this room, and he guessed it was one of these 2 cylindrical objects. Azich glanced at them and said, "You can take these 2 cylindrical objects back and forge 2 weapons." These are parts of the stone pillars that the ancient death god often stepped on. They were just stones at first, but later, under the influence of divinity, they gained the characteristics of steel. I believe weapons forged from them will have the ability to harm enemies' souls. Good stuff, good stuff. Hobbert smiled. Thank you for your generosity. Azich picked up the notebook on the cylindrical object. He opened it and glanced at it, then looked at Hobbert and asked, "Is your father's name Rex?" Hobbert was stunned. "How did you know?" Azich smiled and handed the notebook in his hand to Hobbert. "This is the notebook your father left for you." Hobbert suddenly remembered that he had learned from Dickos that Rex had placed a notebook in a place only his descendants could access. He never dreamed it would be here. Hobbert took the notebook and, by the light, saw a few lines of flowing script on the flyleaf. The charlatan from the Cheritu family said my descendant would come here and loot this place, so I left this notebook here. Below that sentence was another handwriting. I am that charlatan from the Cheritu family. Little friend, I didn't touch anything here. I left it all for you, consider it an uncle's welcome gift. Hobbert thought to himself, then I'll accept it, old man. Then he thought again, Rex actually had dealings with members of the Cheritu family, and they seemed to be on good terms. How dangerous these people are. No, Hobbert realized that his belief that the Cheritu family was dangerous was a bit preconceived. Kay would find them dangerous and be hostile towards them. But for beyonders of the Black Emperor pathway, they could have excellent relations. There's another chapter. Now wasn't the time to scrutinize the notes. Hobbert only glanced at the title page before closing the notebook again. I heard from my elders before that my father placed some information about our family in a place only I could access. I never expected it to be here. Mr. Azich smiled. Sometimes fate is just that wonderful. Putting the notebook back in its original place, Hobbert began to search the skeleton. The skeleton carried a small bag, which also contained a notebook, a map, and some banknotes, which were surprisingly gold pounds. It seemed the person hadn't been dead for long, as these gold pounds hadn't even yellowed. Additionally, there were several charms in the bag, but after such a long time, they had all lost their extraordinary effects. From the skeleton, Hobbert also found a classic pocket watch. Hobbert initially thought it was an ordinary pocket watch, but just as he was about to put it back on the skeleton, he felt the extraordinary nature of the pocket watch. He felt as if some of his spirituality had been absorbed by the pocket watch. Hobbert injected his spirituality into the pocket watch and found that he could use a new skill, stealing. It could steal Beyonder powers, it could steal others' ideals and dreams, it could steal others' thoughts. This was a magical item of the Sequence 5 level from the Error pathway. Hobbert placed the pocket watch aside. Although it was difficult for him to grasp the negative effects of this pocket watch at his current sequence, in terms of ability, this item was definitely as good as, if not better than, the healing fork. Continuing his search, Hobbert also found an extraordinary ring. After putting on the ring, Hobbert felt his brain become particularly agile and lively. He gained astonishing calculation abilities and precise control. Taking off the ring, Hobbert sighed inwardly. To be able to carry 2 magical items on him, it showed that this Beyonder of the Death God pathway had done well in life. Coupled with the fact that the other party's extraordinary characteristic should be sequence 5, this harvest was truly significant. Finally, Hobbert searched the shirt the other party wore inside the coat and surprisingly found a small pocket sewn inside the shirt, containing only a thin card. Hobbert felt something. He pulled out the card and indeed saw the image of Rosal with no vitality in his eyes. This was a blasphemy card, an unactivated blasphemy card. Having had experience touching the Black Emperor card, Hobbert could confirm that this was a genuine blasphemy card. Even Mr. Azich, who was staring blankly beside the ancient death god's corpse, couldn't help but glance over, but seeing it was a normal card, he continued to look at the ancient death god's corpse. A blasphemy card, a pocket watch with extraordinary abilities from the error pathway, a sequence 5 extraordinary characteristic, and a ring that might have the sequence 8 ability of the Wheel of Fortune pathway. It was truly the right decision to ask Mr. Azich to help with this exploration. Even if he could only take 2 of these 4 items, it would still be a bountiful harvest. And there were also the notes and the black iron cylinders that Mr. Azich had already promised him. He truly made a huge profit. Mr. Azich was still staring blankly in front of the ancient death god's corpse. Hobbert stood by silently, waiting. About half an hour later, Mr. Azich seemed to suddenly come back to his senses. He smiled and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting. It's nothing, I have plenty of time today." Hobbert pointed to the items he had just found. "You choose first." Mr. Azich smiled and said, "Your father and uncle left everything here for you. How could I possibly contend with you? Put them away, they are all yours. How could I be so presumptuous?" Hobbert said, while his hands honestly packed the found items into the small bag he had already prepared. Then he repeated his trick, taking off his trench coat and wrapping the 2 black iron cylinders in it. The 2 black iron cylinders were heavier than expected. The trench coat let out a slight groan, as if it could tear at any moment. It was only because Hobbert was very strong now that he could even move them. Mr. Azich glanced at the ancient death god's corpse again, then said to Hobbert, "Thank you for bringing me here. This made me recall many things, although those memories are more like dreams. I also want to thank you for your generosity, which has brought me a bountiful harvest." Hobbert said, "You can seal this place again to prevent others from discovering it." Mr. Azich nodded, "That makes sense." He also planned to come back and study it if he had time in the future. As they spoke, the 2 left the stone chamber, and the illusory door disappeared. Returning to the noble courtyard in the ruins, Mr. Azich resealed it, then took Hobbert through the spirit world back to Backland. But strangely, the coffin in the black fog appeared again on their way back. This time it was closer to the 2 of them, but it seemed to be deterred by Mr. Azich, so it could only watch from the side. Since it was a coffin, Hobbert guessed it was a spirit from the death god pathway, possibly attracted by a descendant of death god or the blasphemy card. Hobbert didn't pay it any mind. Back in Backland, the 2 appeared in an empty alley. Mr. Azich said, "If you need to find me in the future, you can put your letter in the mailbox at 16 Wanbo Avenue. I've arranged for a spirit there to forward letters to me." Hobbert agreed, watching Mr. Azich step into the illusion and re-enter the spirit world. He could feel that after this operation, Mr. Azich's trust in him had increased significantly. Slinging the makeshift bag made from his trench coat over his back, Hobbert walked out of the alley. He found that his location was surprisingly near the law firm. Hobbert exclaimed, "Mr. Azich is truly considerate. There was no need to find a hired carriage." Hobbert simply walked back to Blanca Street. Because Mr. Azich had taken Hobbert through the spirit world both ways, saving time and effort, and even after spending so long in the ruins, it was still not yet noon. This made Hobbert even more eager to acquire a magical item with the ability to travel. It was simply too convenient. Previously, it would take him 4 or 5 hours to travel to and from the ruins by carriage. Back in his room, Hobbert laid out his harvest on the table, growing happier the more he looked at it. Then he set up the altar, sacrificed to himself, and offered all the harvested items except the notes and gold pounds to the country of disorder. Hobbert sat on the Iron Throne, rearranging the items he had harvested one by one. Starting with the 2 black iron cylinders, Hobbert placed his hand on them. With the blessing of the country of disorder, he immediately felt the black iron constantly stripping the surrounding, life, aura. Just as Mr. Azich said, if forged into a weapon, it would definitely possess the characteristic of harming the opponent's spirit body. But who should he find to forge the weapon? Ask Eakins for help. But it would be difficult to explain to him where such good materials came from, and Hobbert didn't want these things to be known by official Beyonders. Hobbert thought of Jessica's friend. She seemed to be an artisan, right? He could commission her to forge a handy weapon for himself. Next, Hobbert picked up the Blasphemy card. Thank you all for your monthly votes. Yesterday, around 9:30 p.m. online, the monthly votes reached the standard for an extra chapter. Fortunately, author had already prepared the extra chapter. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Bernadette. Hobbert chanted the incantation, and the card in his hand immediately emitted a clear light. Rosal's image became 3-dimensional. Rosal was dressed in clothes characteristic of the South Continent, sitting on a pale stone chair, holding a golden bird with South Continent carving features. He had no vitality, exuding an aura like a spirit. It really was the death card. Hobbert smiled. Rosal, the ever-changing. I wonder what he looks like on the witch card. Then Hobbert examined the content on the Blasphemy card. Sequence 9, Corpse Collector. Beyonders of this sequence possess certain corpse characteristics, appearing quite eerie with a lower body temperature, thus avoiding attacks from unintelligent undead. At the same time, they gain improved physical qualities, able to withstand the erosion of decay, cold, and death aura. They naturally possess spirit vision, allowing them to directly see some evil spirits and understand the characteristics and weaknesses of various undead creatures. Main material: dried adult black spotted frog, spiritual dust of a vengeful spirit. Auxiliary materials: 80 ml pure water, 1 black corpse spot flower, 1 dried corpse worm, 12 grams dragon's blood grass powder. Hobbert smacked his lips. This potion looked disgusting. He continued reading down and stopped at Sequence 4. Sequence 4, Undead. Main material: scarlet eyes of a skeleton lord, spiritual crystal of a grey coiled spirit moth. Auxiliary materials: 20 grams of skeleton lord bone powder, a pair of grey coiled spirit moth antennae, 1 undead tricolor flower, 30 ml zombie brain fluid. Ritual: become a dead person. Hobbert's mouth dropped open. He had heard of becoming a poet, becoming a philosopher, but this was the first time he encountered the requirement of becoming a dead person. Is this a suicidal path? To become a dead person? But then he thought that it might refer to a dead person in a mystical sense. In this world full of extraordinary powers, the definition of a dead person has 2 meanings. One is death in the ordinary sense, which means losing all vital signs. The other is a dead person in a mystical sense, the spirit body of someone being spontaneously accepted by the spirit world. A normal person's spirit body has countless ties to the spirit world, but these spirit bodies ultimately belong to the real world. When he loses his vital signs, his spirit body will be accepted by the spirit world and become part of the spirit world. In other words, as long as the spirit body of a Beyonder from the death pathway is accepted by the spirit world, he should be able to complete this ritual. Hobbert recalled Dofus's state. He had always been pale, taciturn, with little emotional fluctuation. Standing there motionless, he truly resembled a dead person. Then Hobbert thought that Dofus was looking for the main material for undead, which meant he already had the potion formula for undead in his hand. Previously, Hobbert had always believed that Dofus's corpse-like state was due to him being a Beyonder of the death pathway. Now it seemed he was preparing for the ritual in advance. He also thought that the qualitative change at the undead level seemed to be an exchange of importance between the spirit body and the physical body. For ordinary people in the real world, of course, the physical body is important. If the physical body loses its vital signs, that person dies. People also see each other's physical bodies, not their spirit bodies. Although both are equally important, it seems as if the spirit body is a subordinate of the physical body. However, after becoming an undead, the Beyander's physical body enters a state of neither life nor death, and the spirit body becomes the more important part, while the physical body seems to become a subordinate. Then Hobbert thought of the former chief of Silver City, so he continued to look down. Sequence 3. Ferryman. Main material. Heart of a black hound spirit beast, 1 complete withered broad-winged cicada. Auxiliary materials. Ritual. Establish a mausoleum, drink the potion inside the mausoleum, open the mausoleum's space to the underworld, or the spirit world, and walk out of the mausoleum on your own amidst the continuous scouring and baptism of the underworld, returning to the human world. Hobbert nodded. As expected, a mausoleum needs to be built, but that former chief obviously couldn't withstand the scouring of the underworld and failed to complete the process of walking out of the mausoleum on his own. There should be some techniques involved, but that former chief had no access to these techniques and could only risk trying on his own. It seems the former chief was also affected by the artificial death, so the reason for his failure is quite complex. As for the phrase, or the spirit world, marked in the ritual, it is not difficult to understand. After all, the underworld is an area opened up by ancient death god from the spirit world. The underworld symbolizes the domain of death. Its baptism and scouring should be a transformation of the spirit body and physical body. The spirit world is slightly different. In addition to a large number of undead, the spirit world also has many spirit world creatures residing there. Its scouring should also allow the ferryman to possess some of the powers or characteristics of spirit world creatures. Then Hobbert thought that the ritual for undead was to become a dead person, and the ritual for ferryman was to build a mausoleum. This seemed like a funeral procession. First, die, then be sent to a mausoleum. It's just unknown whether a grand funeral is required. If so, this is also a very expensive sequence. Thinking of this, Hobbert smiled knowingly and continued to look down. After finishing the entire Blasphemy card, he placed it next to the Black Emperor card. The greatest use of this Blasphemy card for Hobbert was that he now knew the complete sequence potion formula for the death pathway. From today onwards, the Creator would have another complete sequence potion formula. As for the other uses of this card, they completely overlapped with the Black Emperor card. Relatively speaking, Hobbert was still more willing to present himself with the Black Emperor's status. Next Monday, Hobbert planned to sacrifice it to the fool, complete the second bribe, and advance as quickly as possible. As for the Red Priest card, if there was an opportunity, he would extort it from Melik. If not, he would wait for a while, trying to minimize his involvement with Adam's story. Hobbert then beckoned to that extraordinary characteristic. Holding the extraordinary characteristic, he used the status of the country of disorder to confirm that this was a sequence 5 inches gatekeeper, extraordinary characteristic, which could sell for a good amount of money. Placing the extraordinary characteristic on the stone platform over there, Hobbert then held the ring in his hand. Similarly, using the high status of the country of disorder, Hobbert felt the negative effects of the ring. After wearing it, the holder's brain will be in a state of high-speed operation, able to think of only one thing, making it easy to ignore information other than the matter currently being thought about. Long-term wear will increase the burden on the brain and cause a certain degree of damage. The negative effects were not great, but it was not very suitable for use in combat. In combat, one needs to maintain extreme vigilance, and the tendency to ignore information is very dangerous. However, it was very suitable for wearing when thinking about problems or making plans. Finally, there was the antique pocket watch. Hobbert held it in his hand and also learned its negative effects. From the moment it is worn, it begins to theft the holder's spirituality. If worn for more than 10 minutes, it will begin to theft the holder's vitality. If worn for more than 20 minutes, it will begin to theft the holder's luck. After being away from it for half an hour, the time accumulation restarts. Hobbert pinched his chin. Compared to the healing fork, the negative effects were quite significant. If one wanted to avoid damage, it was best to control each wearing time within 10 minutes. Thinking of this, Hobbert summoned the power of order to wrap the pocket watch, attempting to seal it. Although Hobbert's control over the country of disorder was still very limited, as long as it was a sealed artifact or magical item below the demigod level, his sealing could largely reduce negative effects. This pocket watch had some living characteristics, so after being enveloped by the power of order, it immediately began to tremble noticeably. After being ravaged by the power of order, Hobbert held the pocket watch in his hand again, and the negative effects were indeed greatly reduced. There will be no negative effects within 2 hours of wearing it. During this period, it will steal the spirituality of those around the wearer, including the spirituality of the wearer's opponents. After wearing it for more than 2 hours, it will begin to steal the wearer's vitality and luck, and there is a certain probability of stealing the vitality and luck of the wearer's opponents. After taking it off for an hour, the wearing time will be reset. Hobbert nodded with satisfaction. This is much better. He placed the pocket watch on the stone platform over there. He didn't plan to wear it normally, intending to keep it as his trump card. Looking at the colorful extraordinary characteristics, as well as the sealed artifacts and magical items on the stone platform, Hobbert felt a great sense of accomplishment. His current accumulation was already as much as a small extraordinary organization, and the title of evil god was gradually becoming a reality. Just as Hobbert was about to leave the country of disorder, he noticed that the star representing Elliot suddenly lit up. Presumably, the purchase of the water pumps had been finalized. Extending his spirituality to the star belonging to Elliot, Hobbert heard the other party's prayer. Great the Creator, the Patriarch hopes to purchase 2 new water pumps at once, and has given me a sealed artifact that seems to be of no low level, hoping that I can use it to complete the second bribe. Hobbert pondered for a moment. He would accept Elliot's bribe without hesitation, and he could earn more from 2 water pumps, but he would have to wait until he became a corrupted baron. That step was not far off. He could agree for now, but he still needed to use a small account. Hobbert left the country of disorder, and then prayed to himself. Great the Creator, please have your attendant prepare the gold. I will place the order now. The production cycle is about 1 week to 10 days. The transaction will take place after the water pumps are assembled. Then Hobbert entered the country of disorder again, first replying to Elliot in the image and tone of the Creator, okay. At the same time, he mosaicked the image of his own prayer and projected it into Elliot's star. Sitting on the Iron Throne, Hobbert thought that he still needed to establish a company, which was so troublesome. At this moment, he thought of the vanished attendant, Apton. Doesn't this kid want to be a businessman? Give him a chance. However, this kind of thing cannot be said by the Creator. Alas, he had to use a small account again. Hobbert somewhat helplessly left the country of disorder again and prayed to himself. Great the Creator, please help me contact Apton. I have something to entrust to him, and the reward is part of the main materials for a briber. Meet at 16 Wanbo Avenue at 10 p.m. 2 days later. After the prayer, Hobbert entered the country of disorder again. The protruding parts of the Iron Throne were almost worn smooth from him entering and exiting. After mosaicking his recent prayer, Hobbert projected it into the star representing Apton. At this moment, the star representing Elliot lit up. It was Elliot's gratitude. Hobbert listened to it once and, to maintain the Creator's identity, did not reply again. The pool returned to its usual calm. Hobbert complained. My operation just now seemed like a very large company, but the manager was me, the employee was me, and the huge company was supported only by me. He shook his head with a smile and left the country of disorder. Connaught City, Dissy County, Ruin Kingdom. This is the most famous tourist city in the world, with beautiful beaches, pleasant sea breezes, and cheap subtropical fruits and seafood. Everywhere here are unique hotels, restaurants with distinct flavors, and bars with varying decoration styles. Of course, there is also a special product here: gangs. Because most of the shops here are service-oriented, it gives gangs space to collect protection fees. They also have their own bars, their own industries, and forming gangs is also a way to protect their own interests, because the local government's efficiency is very poor, and many times they simply cannot solve their problems or achieve their demands through official channels. And because these gangs have their own industries locally, they never extort tourists, only earn money from tourists, though sometimes they might overcharge. It is precisely because of their professional ethics that they have not damaged the city's image, and tourism here has always been prosperous. In the private room of the Coast Bar, several members of the Coast Gang were sitting around their boss, praising his might and celebrating yesterday's victory. In a gang conflict yesterday, their boss Apton once again used his terrifying power to drive away more than a dozen members of the Blackfish Gang, once again defending the interests of the Coast Gang. Now, this most prosperous coast street was basically their domain. The rise of the Coast Gang had been in the last month. Before that, they were unknown, just a small gang operating a bar. Just a month ago, a gang raided the Coast Bar. Grandfather Apton, who was visiting from Backland, happened to pass by and drove away the raiding gang, saving the Coast Bar. Their former boss, who was beaten to the brink of death, handed the Coast Gang over to Apton and then died. From that moment on, Apton led them to counterattack other gangs and bribe local officials. In just 1 month, the Coast Gang became one of the major gangs in Connaught City. Just as the atmosphere was lively, their boss Apton suddenly froze, then seemed to be somewhat fearful, and then relieved. In short, the boss's expression was very complex. Apton, who originally liked to wear shirts and black trousers, dressed like a young master, was now wearing local silk clothing, looking very much like a gangster. Everyone in the room didn't dare to breathe. After 1 or 2 minutes, Apton said, "I'm going back to Backland." No matter how everyone cried and begged him to stay, boss Apton seemed to have made up his mind to go. He said, "I'm not going to die, why are you crying like this? I'll be back in a while. Blanca Street, Backland." Hobbert opened Rex's notebook and began to read it. After a few pages, Hobbert found that it roughly recorded Rex's movements after returning to Backland. The main content was a record of 7 ancient ruins he discovered in Backland, 4 of which had already fallen into the hands of the Rune royal family. Rex discovered that the royal family seemed to be making some modifications to those 4 ruins. In Rex's notes, he made many guesses about this action of the Rune royal family, sometimes guessing they were building a royal shelter, and sometimes suspecting it was a ritual requirement for a certain sequence of the judge pathway. Hobbert, of course, knew that these modifications should be to transform the ruins into tombs, or that those ruins were originally tombs left by Solomon. It seemed Rex didn't know about the Black Emperor's God Ascension ritual. And that was right. Even for high-sequence beyonders, the God Ascension ritual was information that was beyond their reach. The key was the lack of access channels, and the Orthodox churches had, by common consent, strenuously blocked such information. For a family like the Trentsust family, which had produced a true god, the God Ascension ritual was only known to a very few direct descendants, and they basically would not actively leave relevant written records. Not everyone could have the same encounters as members of the Tarot Club, who could know the secret of God Ascension even at middle sequence or low sequence. So Rex didn't know what the Rune royal family was doing, but it didn't stop him from complaining in his notes that the royal family members were a bunch of locusts. The ruins they excavated were cleaned out very thoroughly, not even leaving a common antique. Moreover, there was a special note that the information on these 4 ruins was useless, and he advised his children not to go to these places, lest they be caught by the royal family. Judging by the ink, this admonition should have been written later. Rex probably never imagined that this information was precisely very important to Hobert, as it was equivalent to marking 4 of George III's 9 tombs. Furthermore, Rex had left back doors of the mysticism pathway in all 4 of these ruins. If these back doors had not been discovered by the royal family, Hobbert could still enter silently. Hobbert seemed to feel the arrangement of fate. This was clearly the key to disrupting George III's advancement. At that time, he would tell the Kastcha family of the Fenaport Kingdom's royal family about these entrances. Kay had no better way at the time and could only forcefully attack one of the tombs, but Rex's information allowed Hobbert to deal with this matter with a leisurely attitude. The Rune royal family was not without enemies. Sometimes, making good use of an enemy's enemies would find oneself great help. Besides the 4 ruins that had been excavated by the Rune royal family in advance, one of the other 3 had been discovered by other Beyonders, and the extraordinary items inside were completely swept away and turned upside down. Only 2 were still relatively well preserved, and one of them was the ruin where the notes were hidden. Regarding the sealed artifact in this ruin, Rex also had a description. The notes said that he and his good friend Arthur Cheritu groped around in the stone chamber with their eyes closed for several days, basically concluding that it should be the corpse of a certain death god. As for the Black Hound spirit beast, these 2 guys actually chased after it and touched it, confirming that it was a Black Hound spirit beast in a rather strange state. As long as one didn't make eye contact with it, there was no danger for Beyonders of Sequence 4 and above. If one was below Sequence 4, even if one didn't make eye contact with this Black Hound spirit beast, staying near it for too long would cause one's mind to collapse, and going insane would be the best outcome. Hobbert could imagine the Black Hound spirit beast's helpless expression. The key was that it couldn't move fast, so it could only let these 2 scoundrels, who came from who knows where, touch it all over. These 2 people were truly bold. Hobbert sighed. As for the method to enter that stone chamber, it only required the blood of a Sequence 6 or higher Beyonder from the Death God pathway or the door pathway to open. Hobbert thought of Azich's way of opening the door. At that time, he had thought that it required the blood of a Death God descendant. In that case, even if Mr. Azich was not present, he could find that stone chamber. Rex had explored the entire underground structure at that time and discovered the sealing method of that stone chamber. As long as more than 500 rooms were arranged around it, that stone chamber would get lost, and always wander around that area. In addition, Rex found many valuable documents in the noble courtyard, which recorded that this courtyard once belonged to Duke Serbia of the Terenzost Empire, who was a direct descendant of the Night Emperor. As Azich said, the Night Emperor was preparing to use the ancient death god's body to design a trap targeting the Underworld Emperor. Through the found documents, Rex discovered some potentially useful information. Along with Rex's notes at the time, there was also a very old paper notebook, which was the most important material left by Duke Serbia. A large part of Rex's notes was a reading reflection on this document. First, Rex discovered that Duke Serbia was deeply trusted by the Night Emperor. From before the period of joint rule, Serbia served as the captain of Trensus's guard, so he knew many secret histories about the Night Emperor. And this guy liked to take notes, so Rex and Hobbert also knew the Night Emperor's secret history. Fortunately, Serbia didn't reveal any scandals, only describing some aspects of the Night Emperor's life before he became a god, specifically, the Night Emperor's human side. Among the materials provided by Duke Serbia, Tudor and Trentsust, later the Blood Emperor and the Night Emperor before becoming Sequence 1, often sat together and chatted. The content of their conversations was all-encompassing, greatly benefiting Serbia, who was on guard nearby. Rex wrote in his notes, "The Blood Emperor and the Night Emperor's relationship is deeper than imagined." Reading this, Hobbert also thought that, after all, these 2 people had been subordinates of Solomon for a long time. At that time, the 2 should have established a deep friendship, which was the basis for their joint plot to get rid of their old boss. However, after becoming Sequence 1, due to the law of extraordinary characteristic, the 2 still turned against each other and eventually a war broke out between the 2 empires. While sighing over the ancients, Hobbert continued to read. In Serbia's materials, one description caught Rex's attention. During one conversation between Tudor and Trentsust about Solomon, both of them noticed that many changes had occurred in Solomon after he became the Black Emperor. It wasn't just the divine changes that occurred from becoming a true god, but it seemed as if he was influenced by some power, often uttering incomprehensible gibberish. Initially, Tudor thought that Solomon was influenced by the true Creator. At that time, the true Creator's church was the Orthodox Church of the Solomon Empire, and the two true gods had a close cooperative relationship. Tudor and Trensused complained more than once that this true Creator always uttered some incomprehensible gibberish, which annoyed them greatly. These complaints were recorded in other sections. In the conversation where they realized Solomon seemed somewhat off, Tudor and Trensused also discovered through exchanging information that Solomon had issued a command to each of them to find a jinn, and whenever that jinn was mentioned, incomprehensible gibberish would emerge from Solomon's mouth. So the two speculated that Solomon might not have been influenced by the true Creator, but rather by an unknown force. Hobbert's eyes narrowed when he read this: the jinn. To be safe, he simply performed a sacrificial ritual, sacrificing the two notebooks from different eras to the country of disorder. Sitting on the Iron Throne, Hobbert then looked at Rex's annotation on this description. This reminds me of the description in the family documents. Our ancestor Trensused, after becoming the Night Emperor, also searched for a special jinn, and he eventually found this jinn. It is said that the jinn contains the secret to obtaining power stronger than a true god. My guess was correct, Hobbert thought. He had previously speculated that the Night Emperor's sudden demise was likely due to the influence of an Old One, causing his state to become very unstable. However, at that time, Hobbert guessed that the uncertain mist had affected the Night Emperor, but now it seems that the Night Emperor might have been influenced by the Child of Chaos. That's why the six gods intervened and eliminated the Night Emperor, but then Hobbert thought of another question. Even the half-mad Blood Emperor was not jointly eliminated by the six gods, so no matter how serious the Night Emperor's problem was, could it be more harmful than being half-mad? Now it seems it really might be more harmful than being half-mad. Hobbert vaguely remembered such a description of the jinn. The jinn had never been obtained by the Orthodox churches. There was once a true god who wanted to destroy it but failed. Perhaps the true god who wanted to destroy the jinn was the Night Emperor, and destroying the jinn was to release the Child of Chaos inside. The Child of Chaos is an Old One from the astral world. After the ancient sun god's demise, the six gods certainly didn't want a being of higher sequence than themselves to exist on Earth, especially since this being was an outer god. What if he opened the Earth's protective barrier, allowing other Old Ones waiting in the starry sky to enter? This should be the reason for the Night Emperor's demise. He not only threatened the six gods' position but also their safety, which is why the Night Emperor was eliminated. But a new problem arose. The Child of Chaos was sealed by the celestial worthy. In this state, could he still influence the Black Emperor and judge pathways? And what about the Trensused family's curse? The celestial worthy's seal should be trustworthy. Theoretically, the Child of Chaos should have little influence on the outside world. However, the fact is that from Black Emperor Solomon onwards, it seems they were affected by the Child of Chaos, and the Judge Night Emperor was also affected by the Child of Chaos. So Hobbert thought of another Old One, the Uncertain Mist. A part of the Uncertain Mist's power comes from the Child of Chaos. Could it be that he used the power belonging to the Child of Chaos to influence Solomon and Trensused? But why did the Black Emperor and the Night Emperor seek out the jinn? And what did the Trensused family's curse have to do with them? Hobbert looked at the notes again. Both Civilis and Rex's descriptions stopped there. Clearly, they had no further information. Still unable to see the full picture, Hobbert sighed. He really wanted to go find Bernadette now and borrow the jinn to ask it properly. Hobbert rubbed his forehead. This question could only be considered up to this point. He would continue to think about it after finding further information. Continuing to read, Rex's notes also recorded some history of the Trensused family, such as how Rex's ancestors and Eliot's ancestors parted ways approximately 600 years ago. Although Eliot's clan still had many members, they basically just managed to survive. When they first arrived on the South Continent, they were displaced for a period of time, and only in the last 100 or 200 years did they find a suitable place to settle. Rex's branch, under the dual blows of the curse and the Orthodox churches, gradually dwindled in numbers but produced many powerhouses. Almost every 20 to 30 years, a powerhouse would challenge the family's curse, but without exception, they all failed. Strangely, after their deaths, their extraordinary characteristics disappeared. The last part of the notes was Rex's record of the changes after he became a mad mage. First, he roughly heard the maddening whispers, which seemed to be shouting, "I have placed the entrance to the country of disorder within the family's bloodline." Hobbert was startled and looked at the blurry figure in the pool. This guy couldn't really be the Night Emperor, could he? Are you sick? You've been tormenting your descendants for over 1,000 years. Then Hobbert thought that he wasn't just shouting, "Country of disorder," he was shouting such a complex sentence. Connecting this with the Trensused brass book, which was contaminated by the country of disorder, it was clear that Trensused had found the country of disorder at that time. But for some reason, he failed to become an Old One. Could it be that he was eliminated by the 6 gods when he was becoming an Old One? At that time, the Night Emperor had already established a connection with the country of disorder. To facilitate his descendants becoming Old Ones, he left the entrance in the Trensused family's bloodline. Along with the entrance to the country of disorder, the Night Emperor's explanation was also left behind, but for a contaminated god, his ordinary explanation sounded like maddening whispers to his descendants. Hobbert smiled. This speculation seemed both reasonable and unreasonable. If that were true, then the Trensused family would be as tragic as the Abraham family, slightly better than the Abraham family. After all, the Trensused family could still produce saints. Hobbert continued to flip through Rex's notes. The following sections were about Rex's search for information about the country of disorder. When he learned that the country of disorder was a source material, he also made a similar guess to Hobbert's. Rex hadn't heard all the whispers. He believed that if he heard them completely, he would find a way to lift the curse. However, if he wanted to hear them all, he would have to continue advancing, and he might repeat the mistakes of his predecessors. And at this time, Hobbert had just been born, and he wanted to spend more time with his child. But then he thought that Hobbert would also suffer from the torment of maddening whispers in the future, and that Hobbert might also face the same choice as himself in the future. So he decided to attempt to advance and challenge the family's curse while he was still in good condition. Before that, however, he made some preparations for Hobbert, including the choices he had previously provided to Hobbert. The notes ended there. Although they only recorded the course of events, Hobbert could still feel a deep fatherly love. This made Hobbert recall the old man from the Ad era. He wondered how the old couple were doing after he left the Ad era. Lost in thought, Hobbert turned to the last page of the notes. Hobbert had originally thought Rex would write a few mushy words, but there was only one line of words written in a flamboyant style. "Since you've chosen this path, walk it with your head held high." Hobbert smiled knowingly and placed both notebooks on the stone platform there. After leaving the country of disorder, Hobbert sat by the window for a long time, watching the people come and go outside. He was both digesting the information he had received today and missing his relatives. It wasn't until the sun set that Hobbert put away his sentimental mood and looked at the notebook and map he had found on the skeleton lord's body on the table. Hobbert read a few pages with his legs crossed, gradually putting away his contempt and sitting up straight to read seriously. This deceased Beyander had found a skeleton lord before he died. The notebook in Hobbert's hand bore the signature of its previous owner, Valentine Victor. It was less like a notebook and more like a collection of clumsy ghost stories. The content of the stories was quite interesting to Hobbert, such as an event that occurred deep in the mountains of Civilis County, Ruin Kingdom. There was a hunter in the deep mountains who was very good at setting traps. Suddenly, from one day on, the prey he caught in his traps was always gnawed on by some beast. But strangely, this experienced hunter could not tell what kind of beast had gnawed on his prey from the bite marks. A few days later, when the hunter went to check his traps again, he found that his prey had just been gnawed on not long ago. He quickly tracked down the culprit along the blood trail. After chasing for about 1 or 2 hours, the hunter reached the edge of a forest. By then, the sky was gradually darkening. In the deep mountains, the sun sets very quickly. As soon as the sun drops below the mountaintop, the surroundings are covered as if by a black veil. The hunter did not intend to let the culprit go just like that and continued to chase into the forest. The moment the hunter stepped into the forest, he felt that the mountain wind inside was exceptionally cold, as if countless pairs of eyes were staring at him. Just as the hunter was about to turn back, he discovered a towering tree. This tree had long branches and leaves, and its canopy covered a large area. The tree was covered with corpses, all of which had been hanged. As the mountain wind blew, the corpses swayed with the wind. The hunter was so scared that he sat down on the ground. Just then, the corpses on the tree began to move. They uniformly raised their hands, took off the ropes that had hanged them, climbed down the tree agilely, and rushed towards the hunter. Especially one skeleton, it moved particularly agilely, chasing at the very front. The hunter's will to survive was ignited, and he ran with all his might until deep into the night before he managed to escape. As Hobbert read the notebook's content, he thought, if Furs saw this story, with her embellishment and atmosphere building, it would make a very good ghost story. However, Valentine's wording and descriptions were very bland, as if he were casually talking about eating barbecue tonight, so the content was interesting, but it was depicted very clumsily by the notebook's owner. The key was that there was also Valentine's exploration later. He didn't say a word about the exploration process, only leaving one sentence. Suspected to be a sacrifice to demons, multiple corpses underwent corpse transformation, but no skeleton lord was found. This immediately reminded Hobbert of Dofus. Perhaps when the gatekeeper prepares for advancement, they all appear emotionless about everything around them. There were 7 or 8 similar ghost stories above, and Valentine's footsteps almost covered the entire North Continent. Finally, in Coulson County, southeastern Feniport Kingdom, Valentine discovered the true skeleton lord. He tried twice but failed to kill that skeleton lord, and the second time he almost fell into the skeleton lord's ambush. So Valentine returned to Ruin Kingdom, wanting to ask his teacher for help. The notebook ended there. Hobbert could imagine that on Valentine's way back to Backland, he was attracted by the ancient death god's corpse and ultimately died in the stone chamber. Hobbert then opened the map. The map marked the location of the skeleton lord, but it did not look like a ruin map. He put on his windbreaker, went to a bookstore on the street to buy a map of the Feniport Kingdom, and brought it back to compare. Indeed, the map Valentine left was a map of Coulson County, Feniport Kingdom. Coulson County is located between Feniport's capital, Feniport City, and the port city of Sevilla, bordering the small country of Masic. The entire county is basically continuous mountainous terrain. Hobbert nodded. In such deep mountains and old forests, it is indeed easy for territorial Beander creatures, or rather, undead creatures like the skeleton lord, to appear. After confirming the skeleton lord's location, Hobbert folded the map, tucked it into the notebook, picked up his cane, left notes for Furs and Zio, telling them not to save dinner for him. Then he hopped into a hansom cab and returned to his home in Queen's District. In the carriage, Hobbert sighed. Today's encounter was truly exciting. Just as he thought of this, his stomach rumbled twice. Only then did he remember that at noon, he had been so busy looking at the spoils of war, and then attracted by Rex's notebook, that he had forgotten to eat lunch. Returning home, he arrived just as Christine's family was starting dinner. Hobbert sat down and began to eat ravenously. Donna suspected, "Hobbert, are you so poor now that you can't even afford food?" Hobbert took a sip of wine and, while using his fork to spear a chicken wing for himself, asked, "Why would you think that? I heard that in the last case, you offended all the gentlemen in Backland, so you think no one is coming to me for lawsuits anymore?" Donna nodded. Tyrone also stared at Hobbert with a tense expression, while Christine and Monliza smiled and shook their heads. "Not at all. The people coming to me for lawsuits are already lined up until next month." Hobbert smiled. "I am a famous lawyer now. My savings are so much that they would scare you to death if I told you." "PFF'd, you're lying, your savings can't possibly reach £1,000. Hobbert almost got poked by a chicken wing bone. Donna, can't you have a little ambition? £1,000 scares you? Donna said seriously, of course it does. You must have robbed a bank, otherwise how could you have so much money? Hobbert suddenly realized that mixing in the extraordinary circle was even more profitable than robbing a bank. No wonder official Beyonders had to arrest wild Beyonders when they saw them. Of course, the premise was to have country of disorder as a helper, otherwise it would be easy to become someone else's wealth. While bickering with his sister, Hobbert finished dinner, then followed Christine into the study. Hobbert invited Dolphus to come in as well. After closing the study door, he began to recount the process of exploring the ruins today. Of course, Hobbert did not explain some of Mr. Azich's words and actions. Upon hearing that it was the ancient death god's corpse inside, Dolphus's eyes lit up, finding it difficult to maintain his dead man state. Christine said, so, the person who explored the ruins with you must be at least a sequence 3. To be able to suppress the Black Hound spirit beast so easily, he must be at least a sequence 3. Actually, Hobbert had done some processing. If Christine knew that Azich treated the Black Hound spirit beast like a servant, Christine would definitely think that the angel had ulterior motives. Otherwise, if the other party was an angel, he might not even look a sequence 7 in the eye, so how could he have become acquainted with Hobbert? Hobbert feigned ignorance, he told me he was only a sequence 4. Christine shook her head. Knowing such a saint was Hobbert's opportunity, and she did not intend to interfere too much. Finally, Hobbert revealed the clue about the Skeleton Lord, but he noticed that when he mentioned the Skeleton Lord being in the Fenaport Kingdom, Christine and Dolphus's expressions changed. After Hobbert obtained the clue about Skeleton Lord from Valentine's notes, he immediately decided to inform Dolphus. Firstly, it was due to their previous agreement during the assassination of Bei Kai Lang, and secondly, Hobbert estimated that he could also benefit once Dolphus became a demigod. However, Hobbert noticed that when he revealed the location of Skeleton Lord, Christine and Dolphus's expressions seemed off. Hobbert asked, is there something wrong with the content in the notes? Christine, however, countered, are you sure the saint who explored the ruins with you didn't touch this notebook? Hobbert was startled, I'm sure. Christine remained silent for a full 3 seconds before smiling and saying, Dolphus, this is your chance to advance, but now is not the time to deal with Skeleton Lord. Dolphus nodded, I know. Seeing Hobbert still looking puzzled, Christine smiled and said, your clue is a bit coincidental with something we are currently planning. Hobbert let out an, oh, realizing they suspected Azich had learned of their plan. He wasn't too worried about this, because he knew that even if Azich knew about their plan, as long as it wasn't something that harmed others, Azich wouldn't bother to interfere. The topic ended there, and Christine began to talk about the geography and culture of Coulson County in the Fenaport Kingdom. Don't let this county's mountainous terrain deceive you. There was once a very prosperous shipping route there, but more than 50 years ago, that route suddenly ceased operation. The reasons for the interruption vary. Some say an earthquake occurred, causing the river to change its course. Some say that the worship of an evil god emerged, causing the Fenaport Kingdom and the Earth Mother Church to abandon the area. I heard a reliable piece of information that should be closest to the truth. An earthquake and river diversion did indeed happen, but many strange things also occurred subsequently. In order to reopen the shipping route, a demigod from the Fenaport Kingdom died in Coulson County. Both the royal family and the church believed that reopening the route would come at a huge, uneconomical cost, so this area was essentially abandoned. Now, Coulson County is where the Fenaport Kingdom exiles criminals and grants nominal fiefdoms to some viscounts and barons. For example, if someone performed a meritorious deed, the royal family might want to confer upon him the title of baron, but not wish to grant him a fiefdom, so they would confer the title upon him in Coulson County. A baron conferred in Coulson County would know it's not a good place and wouldn't go to his fiefdom, simply holding the title in Fenaport City. It is said that over the past few decades, Coulson County has become a lawless land. In this era, there was no internet, and no channels to obtain information about a place's culture, so Hobbert always listened with extra attention when he heard such information. After a few more idle chats, Hobbert took his leave and returned to his bedroom to rest. In the study, Dolphus asked Christine, "When do you plan to tell Hobbert?" "Wait a little longer," Christine said, "let him choose whether to get involved." Perhaps because he had seen the corpse of ancient death god, Hobbert's astral body and spiritual body were greatly shaken, causing him to have nightmares all night. One moment he dreamed of being chased by Blackhound's spirit beast, the next he dreamed of being pursued by the corpse of ancient death god, Skeleton Lord, the coffin he encountered in the spirit world, and some people he had killed also joined in the fun. It wasn't until close to dawn that Hobbert finally slept more soundly. But today required him to wake up early. After a simple breakfast, Hobbert yawned and arrived at the law firm early. Jessica had already been waiting by Hobbert's office door with documents in her arms, and upon seeing Hobbert, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. "Hobbert, these are the documents you requested." Hobbert hadn't come yesterday, and she was afraid he would be late today. Hobbert glanced at them. "Very good, let's go, come with me to court." Today was the day Ms. Emma, the streetwalker's, case was to be heard. Jessica said with some concern, "Your condition." This case had also attracted media attention, as many newspapers enjoyed such scandalous news, and although Jessica knew Hobbert had no dealings with those streetwalkers, it didn't stop the media from speculating and fabricating stories about it. Hobbert smiled. "It's all right, isn't the defendant not hiring a lawyer?" Amidst Jessica's worries, the two of them arrived at the magistrate's court. Originally, the magistrate's court didn't take this case too seriously and simply arranged a random courtroom. However, on the day of the hearing, a large number of alluringly dressed and charming-eyed ladies arrived, along with many reporters requesting to observe. Those ladies found a few clients who worked at the court, so the case was heard in Backland's largest magistrate's court. It could accommodate 200 to 300 observers, but the observation seats were still insufficient, and many people stood in the corridors, doorways, and outside the windows to observe. When Hobbert and Jessica arrived at the court, the main entrance was already completely blocked, but fortunately, both of them were agile and climbed into the courtroom through a window, almost missing the start time of the hearing. Plaintiff Emma and defendant Wendell had already arrived, and Emma, with a beaming smile, greeted Hobbert and invited him to sit beside her. On the other side, defendant Wendell's eyes weren't enough, as he gazed around at the room full of flamboyantly dressed ladies. Soon, the judge took his seat, and after confirming that Wendell did not require a lawyer, the judge announced the opening of the trial. Hobbert first stated Wendell's crimes, and although it was a simple statement, it aroused public indignation, and everyone began to curse Wendell. The judge hammered his gavel for a long time to maintain order, and then it was Wendell's turn to speak. This 30-something middle-aged man was extremely arrogant. "More than once, people have sued me, but without exception, they have all failed. I'll say it again, prostitution fees are not considered legal income and are not protected by law, you simply cannot convict me. The previous lawyer's assistant, who was quite good, couldn't win, and you, Hobbert, no matter how famous you are, unless you can amend the laws of Ruined Kingdom, you shouldn't expect to win either." These words triggered a new round of curses from everyone, and Hobbert, as a Ruinous, couldn't even understand what some of the streetwalkers were cursing about. This made him sigh at the diversity of languages. The judge's gavel was almost worn out, yet he still couldn't quiet the crowd. It was only with Hobbert and Jessica's loud persuasion that everyone finally quieted down. The magistrate's court rarely had observers, and the judge, seeing this scene for the first time, wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and said to Hobbert, "Plaintiff's lawyer, the defendant is right, I really can't convict him." Hobbert smiled and said, "Your Honor, let's try a different approach, I will accuse the defendant of fraud." Neither the people in the observation gallery, nor Plaintiff Emma, nor defendant Wendell understood what he meant, but the judge's eyes lit up. Jessica's eyes almost sparkled. She mumbled, I learned something, there's even a maneuver like this." In the defendant's stand, Wendell laughed, "Fraud. You, haha, you must be joking. What does this have to do with fraud?" Hobbert asked the spectators, everyone, is it common sense for a client to pay after you provide services to them? Regardless of whether they understood Hobbert's intention, everyone answered in unison, yes. Hobbert picked up his folder. I have here a proof of the defendant's income, which is sufficient to show that the defendant has the financial means to pay for the services provided by Ms. Emma. However, the other party did not pay, which violates the basic common sense of customary practice and meets the legal definition of fraud. Wendell laughed, so what? You still can't change the fact that prostitution fees are illegal income. Don't think you have the right to toy with the law. My team will sue you into bankruptcy for a while. Hobbert said coldly, relevant legal provisions state that for economic losses arising from fraud, there is no requirement regarding the source of income. Some people had already understood Hobbert's meaning. Amidst the applause from the spectators, Hobbert continued loudly, therefore, Mr. Wendell, I accuse you of defrauding my client. You must compensate her for all her losses, including my commission. The applause from the spectators grew louder and louder, and some people even started cheering. Wendell's face was ashen. He now regretted not hiring a lawyer, because he had no way to judge the truthfulness of Hobbert's words. After the judge finally restored order to the court, he almost immediately pronounced the verdict. The defendant is found guilty of fraud and must compensate the plaintiff for all economic losses, lost wages, lawyer's commission, etc., totaling £12, and be fined £5. Sentenced to 6 months in prison. Wendell was stunned. Sentenced to prison too. The judge glanced at him. He had thought he was proficient in law, but now it seemed he was a legal illiterate who had merely found a legal loophole and gotten away with it for so long. He regretted it somewhat. If he had known the other party was at this level, he would have given a harsher sentence. I want to appeal, Wendell quickly said. Hobbert immediately said, Your Honor, I suggest enforcing the defendant's financial compensation first. The judge immediately said, agreed. Then he said to Wendell, Defendant, you have the right to appeal, but you must first pay the fine and economic compensation. According to the relevant regulations of the Ruined Kingdom, this court has the right to enforce financial penalties against you. I'll pay now. Wendell had lost his arrogance from earlier and immediately reached for his wallet. This result once again caused a burst of cheers from the spectators. Hobbert stood up and waved his hand at everyone, and they immediately stopped cheering. He smiled, Girls, if he consumes at your place and doesn't pay, or if there are similar cases within 3 years, you can all come to my team for a commission. Indeed, several people gathered around, wanting to commission similar cases. Hobbert asked Jessica to arrange a time to discuss the cases with them. He planned to let Jessica handle all such cases. The economic compensation and fine were settled in court, and Wendell was temporarily taken into custody. Emma shook Hobbert's hand, Thank you for helping me get justice. No matter when you visit my place, it's all free. Someone in the defendant's stand shouted, Hobbert, my place is also free. Mine too. Hobbert smiled, If it's just for dancing and singing, I'll go. We have such services there. Even if we don't, we will in the future. On the way out of the courtroom, everyone scrambled to shake Hobbert's hand. Hobbert shook hands with everyone as he walked out, and suddenly he saw the reporters busily writing. Hobbert, who had always been very media conscious, realized that he had to say something at this moment to elevate the case. So he stopped and said to everyone, Girls, don't mind those worldly gazes. Your current choices and circumstances are the sorrow of this era. Who doesn't want to support themselves through labor that isn't discriminated against? But this era hasn't given you such opportunities. Don't look down on yourselves because of the sorrow of this era. Girls, lift your noble heads. Your choices are already immeasurably better than those of robbers, thieves, and villains. The atmosphere in the courtroom reached a climax. Some cheered loudly, some covered their mouths and wept. Before this, no one had ever cared about their interests, no one had ever understood their difficulties, never before. But today was different. For the first time, they felt respected like a person. Although Hobbert had left, the ladies present were still immersed in the emotions from earlier, unable to extricate themselves for a long time. The reporters, meanwhile, squeezed out vigorously. Hobbert's words just now were enough to be tomorrow's headline. In the carriage on the way back, Jessica's eyes were shining. "Hobbert, we will definitely become the most dazzling color of this era." She was also deeply moved by Hobbert's words. Hobbert smiled. "Our journey is still very long." He had originally wanted to discuss with Jessica about asking her friend to help him forge weapons, but the current atmosphere was really not suitable for that. Saturday morning, 15 Minsk Street. Klein went out and bought a pie for his breakfast. As usual, he ate his breakfast while reading the newspaper. After finishing his meal, he planned to go to the Dockers' Union to confirm the information provided by Miss Hugh. Klein saw that the newspaper's headline was about Hobbert. This was the second time he had seen news about Hobbert in the newspaper. He read it carefully, sentence by sentence. When he saw the description of Emma's case, Klein sighed. He really dares to take on such cases. Having been in this world for so long, Klein naturally knew the public's expectations for gentlemen in this era. Hobbert's actions were simply like those of a fighter. He had just offended the entire Backland elite, and now he was speaking out for the streetwalkers. Especially when he saw Hobbert's final speech, Klein put down the newspaper and stared blankly at the pie in front of him. He had been in this world for so long, and this was the first time he had seen a speech that so aligned with his own values. Recalling his previous conversations with those gentlemen, there was almost no thought of understanding or respecting the common people. They either simply didn't comprehend the poverty of the common people, or they were glad they hadn't fallen to that point. Then Klein thought that he had also wanted to bring about some changes to this world before, but every time he thought of this, he would make excuses for himself. This is an extraordinary world, and ordinary people have no chance of turning their lives around. But Hobbert, as a ruined person, was fighting for the interests of ordinary people in this world. Wasn't that changing this world? Backland, Queen's District. A copy of the Backland Daily lay open on a soft stool. Beside the soft stool, a golden retriever lay on the carpet, reading a book spread open in front of it, line by line, often extending a paw to turn the page. A beautiful young girl stood by the French window, staring blankly at the flowers outside, as if lost in thought. The girl, the flowers, and the French window formed a perfect composition. After a long while, the young girl Audrey suddenly said, "Susie," he lied. Susie, the golden retriever, folded a corner of the page and closed the book. "Who are you talking about, Audrey?" Audrey pointed to the newspaper. "Mr. Hobbert. Did he deceive your feelings?" Audrey smiled helplessly. "Susie, you should read fewer romance novels. You could read some poetry collections, or the psychology textbooks I collected." Susie pressed a paw onto the romance novel in front of her. "Okay. I remember when I first met Mr. Hobbert, he said he didn't represent justice," Audrey said. "But he has always been doing just things." Susie picked up the newspaper from the soft stool, spread it out on the carpet, and began to read. "Oh, my goodness, he's in the newspaper again. Another very challenging case. Yes, his reputation will definitely suffer because of it," Audrey said. "I plan to initiate a Justice League gathering next week to see if we can help this gentleman with justice in his heart." "That's a good idea, Audrey," Susie asked. "Can I join too?" Not yet, Susie." Audrey, seeing Susie looking a bit disappointed, quickly added, "If there's an opportunity in the future, I'll introduce you to the association." 192 Blanca Street. Hobbert. Hugh, sitting at the dining table, shook the newspaper in her hand. "We only found out you did another big thing by reading the newspaper." Hobbert smiled. "I also didn't expect the impact of this case to be so great." That was the truth. Furs, however, worried. "Hobbert, although your speech in court was very inspiring, the gentlemen and ladies of Backland probably care more about you defending a street girl." Hugh also said, "Yes, there will definitely be people questioning your motives behind your back." Hobbert poured the warmed milk into 3 cups. Ladies, sometimes we elevate unimportant people by caring about their opinions. Hugh and Furs found Hobbert's idea very fresh. They got up to take their milk, listening intently. Hobbert smiled. I've recently figured it out. There's no need to care so much about the opinions of people who are not important in our lives. On the other hand, Miss Emma, the client, sees me as her last hope. If I don't act, the defendant's malicious actions will not be stopped. To be honest, being a hero feels pretty good. The 3 of them ate toast and drank warm milk. Hugh sighed. Justice is timeless. Hobbert chuckled. I just did something I thought was right. It has nothing to do with justice. I am not a person who advocates justice. As he spoke, he got up and put on his trench coat. I'm going to be late again. I'll have to trouble you 2 to clean up the dishes. No problem, Furs waved the toast in her hand. After all, we enjoyed your toast and warm milk. Picking up his cane, Hobbert hurried to the law firm. Only when he reached the entrance of the firm did he slow his pace, appearing unhurried as he entered his office. Around 10 o'clock, Jessica came to his office to report, Hobbert, so far, I've taken on 4 cases similar to Ms. Emma's. Hobbert nodded. You can handle them all. Come to me if you encounter any problems you can't solve. Jessica agreed and was about to turn around when Hobbert called out to her again, I have a personal matter I need your help with. Jessica closed the office door and sat opposite Hobbert. Please tell me. From my observation, your friend Kelly should be an artisan, right? Jessica was startled at first, then remembered giving Hobbert a keychain before, and she nodded. That's right. I want to commission her to forge a weapon for me, Hobbert said straightforwardly. I hope you can help me facilitate this transaction. It just so happens that she might have something to commission you for as well, Jessica said. How about we find a restaurant tonight? We can talk while we eat. Not tonight, I have an appointment, Hobbert said. And a restaurant isn't a good place for a conversation. Let's talk in the office tomorrow. If you're not comfortable, you can find a quiet, safe place to talk, and I'll come to you. Then let's come to the office. Hobbert smiled and nodded, and Jessica took her leave. Time flew by amidst the busy schedule. In the afternoon, just as Hobbert was about to rest for a while, Jessica handed him the replies from Elizabeth and Serena. Opening Elizabeth's letter, after a few polite greetings, she mentioned that she occasionally had the same nightmare recently, dreaming of a minotaur monster with golden antlers. She had similar experiences before and only escaped the recurring nightmare with the help of a friend, but that friend was no longer around. Elizabeth went to the Diviner Club to seek help from other diviners, but the advice they gave had no effect. Elizabeth then discussed the topic of diviners in the letter, saying that she had previously known a gentleman who truly understood mysticism, which gave her a new understanding of it. After interacting with diviners during this period, she found that there seemed to be 2 types of diviners. One type divined very accurately and rarely gave symbolic interpretations. The other type always gave symbolic interpretations, becoming more confusing the more they spoke. She asked Hobbert how to distinguish between these 2 types of diviners and if he had a solution to this problem. Finally, she mentioned Melissa's matter. She invited Melissa to Backland to relax, but Melissa did not accept. Hobbert held the letter and pondered internally. Elizabeth's spirituality seems to be slightly higher than normal people's. Through observation, she can vaguely perceive the difference between a true diviner and an ordinary diviner. Perhaps it's precisely because her spirituality is a bit higher that she unconsciously recalled some memories hidden by the psychological spoon during sleep. Then Hobbert thought, the gentleman she mentioned who truly understands mysticism should be Klein. He remembered that Kay had helped Elizabeth resolve a haunting incident once. After a moment of thought, Hobbert replied to Elizabeth, telling her that he could solve her nightmare problem, but it had to be done in person. He advised Elizabeth not to casually seek interpretations from diviners anymore, as it was difficult to encounter a true expert in daily life. Finally, he brought up Melissa's matter, inviting Melissa's brother to also visit Backland to see the Order Clock and the Russell Memorial Exhibition. Hobbert opened Serena's letter again. This young lady was quite clever. Seeing that Hobbert did not refuse her request to be her mysticism tutor, she began to ask Hobbert some questions about mysticism. However, all the questions were about how the brown star operated and what it represented, or how the red star operated and how it should be interpreted, and so on. Hobbert smiled helplessly. This tutor doesn't know these things either. In fact, mysticism is divided into two types: ordinary mysticism and extraordinary mysticism. Ordinary mysticism is basically what ordinary people perceive as mysticism. Ordinary people's spirituality can also sense the existence of the mysterious world, but their perception is very vague, and they can only observe the superficial phenomena of mysticism. Take rituals, for example. Ordinary people burning the correct herbs and chanting the correct incantations also have a certain probability of receiving a response from a deity. They would believe that the response was entirely due to the herbs and incantations, and that those herbs had the function of pleasing deities. Extraordinary mysticism, however, can explain the principles behind rituals. Herbs can only assist in establishing a channel to the divine kingdom's gate. The main factors are still the supplicant's spirituality and incantations, which establish the correct channel. Only when there is a connection in a mystical sense with the divine kingdom's gate will the deity hear the prayer and use the established channel to respond. The knowledge Serena had learned before was clearly just ordinary mystical knowledge, and Hobbert didn't know much about it. He was more proficient in extraordinary mysticism. After some thought, Hobbert replied to Serena, telling her that these were all superficial aspects of mysticism, and invited her to visit Backland with him. After finishing the letter, Hobbert rested for a while, had dinner at home, then picked up his cane again and took a carriage to 16 Wanbo Avenue. After nightfall, there were few people on this street, but the courtyards all kept fierce dogs. As the carriage passed, a series of barks were stirred up. Hobbert put on his mask in the carriage. After getting out, he found that Apton had already arrived. Apton's hair, which had been burned off in the previous battle, had grown back completely. His overall demeanor had also changed somewhat. He no longer looked like a young master but appeared much more mature. Hobbert walked forward and asked, "Why didn't you go in first?" Apton smiled. "I inquired this afternoon, and this is a haunted house." He had indeed made great progress, even knowing to inquire about the meeting location in advance. "Let's go. There's only one messenger here." Hobbert opened the door and entered as if returning to his own courtyard. "Messenger." Apton pondered Hobbert's words while quickly following him. Upon arriving in the dilapidated hall of the house, neither of them turned on electric lights or lit candles. In the darkness, they could clearly see each other's outlines and general expressions. Hobbert asked Apton about his recent experiences. He had not expected Apton to act as a barbarian by becoming a gang leader. However, based on Apton's feelings, he also received feedback on the potion's digestion, but compared to Hobbert's approach of antagonizing an entire class, the digestion speed was slower. This knowledge, which helps you avoid losing control, is a benefit only available to the creator's deer. Hobbert said, "Don't spread it everywhere." "I understand." Apton breathed a sigh of relief. Since he was a creator's deer, there should be no danger. After discussing this topic, Hobbert said, "I need you to establish a company and use that company's name to purchase 2 steam pumps. As for the remuneration, I mentioned it before, part of the briber's extraordinary characteristic." He paused and then said, "There are 2 forms of remuneration. One is for you to pay for the 2 pumps, which will be about £1,000. The remuneration you can receive is 2/3 of a briber's extraordinary characteristic. Generally speaking, a sequence 7 extraordinary characteristic is worth £1,200, but during most transactions, it will be overpriced to around £1,500 to £1,800. As a creator's deer, you can also enjoy the benefit of the extraordinary characteristics base price. Of course, the premise is that I have the extraordinary characteristic you need here." Apton nodded. "Praise the creator. This kid finally has some self-awareness as a believer." Hobbert continued, 2/3 of a briber's extraordinary characteristic is equivalent to £800, but you can also get the general distributorship of Rui Machinery Company, which is a channel that cannot be bought for £200. The second form is, I will pay the £1,000 cost. You just need to register a company in your name and buy the 2 pumps I need, then the commission ends. However, you can only get 1/8 of a briber's extraordinary characteristic, and your company will not get the general distributorship. Well, as far as I know, there are only 5 general distributors for this company worldwide. You can think about how to choose the remuneration. Apton asked, the Rui Machinery Company you mentioned, is that the large steam engine company on Nicro Street? Yes. You actually have such a channel. Hobbert smiled, deliberately not making it too clear, it's not necessarily that I have such a channel. Apton nodded. I understand. It could also be a channel of other deer. Hobbert thought to himself, as long as you understand. These days, not only is it tiring to play an evil god, but it's also tiring to play an evil god's deer. I choose the first commission model. Apton had done some research when he had the idea of doing business before. He had heard of Rui Machinery Company and knew the weight of this general distributorship. Hobbert smiled. A wise choice. If I hadn't heard that you wanted to do business, I wouldn't have given you this commission. He said, after the commission ends, I will accumulate your remuneration and distribute it to you when you accept my future commissions and earn another 1/3 of the extraordinary characteristic. Or, if you are in a hurry to advance, you can also make up the difference with £400 and get the briber's extraordinary characteristic from me. Apton nodded. Although my condition is much better now, I still need to be a barbarian for a while longer before I have the confidence to advance. Hobbert hummed and said, after setting up the company, contact me by praying to the Creator, and pick up the goods according to my instructions. Then find a secluded warehouse and sacrifice the pumps to the Creator. Apton was stunned. The Creator, sacrifice to the Creator. Do deities still need pumps? Ruin Customs inspects this kind of machinery very strictly. We can only rely on the Creator to bestow it upon other deer who are thousands of miles away. Hobbert brought this up now to provide an explanation and maintain the Creator's image. Then he reminded, the sacrifice is paid for by the buyer. You just need to make the sacrifice. Apton nodded, and his wariness towards the Creator significantly decreased. Even if sacrifices were needed, the Creator was willing to help his deer with such small favors, making him a benevolent evil, deity. Hobbert then said to Apton, after completing this commission, you can go back to being your boss, and at the same time, you can sell products from Rui Machinery Company. I think, just by placing an advertisement in the newspaper, customers will come to our door. After all, the products of Rui Machinery Company were high-tech products of this ad era, and they were also in high demand. Hobbert continued, if there is a new commission, I will ask the Creator to contact you again. Future commissions will also be in this format, so I won't explain it further. Except for a few commissions that you must complete, you have the right to refuse most commissions, and I will not let you suffer any losses on any single commission. The last stone in Apton's heart fell. I like this method of commissioning. This not only gave him enough freedom but also provided him with a powerful, meander organization to rely on. He was very satisfied with this loose organizational structure. After Hobbert finished explaining the task and providing the necessary clarifications, to maintain the atmosphere of a mysterious organization, he did not engage in much further conversation. He and Apton left the abandoned villa one after another. In the carriage on the way back, Hobbert took off his mask and suddenly realized that he hadn't spent a single penny on this transaction, yet he was able to profit from both sides. The cost was borne by Apton, and the briber extraordinary characteristic, which was the reward, was the one Apton had previously given to Hobbert. On the other side, Elliot's payment would not be a single penny less. Hobbert's only contribution was favors and channels, but everyone benefited mutually, gaining corresponding interests or advantages. Thinking of this, he smiled, feeling that he had already established his own connections in this world. Of course, he had to thank his original father and adoptive father, as the connections they had built for Hobbert provided considerable assistance. The next morning, Hobbert woke up after 9 o'clock. Like all gentlemen in Backland, he ate breakfast while reading the newspaper. One piece of information caught Hobbert's attention: a plague suddenly broke out in the Docklands labor union. It is said to be highly contagious. The relevant departments have sealed off the labor union's office building and dormitory building and have urgently summoned other employees for unified treatment. According to informed sources, this plague should be overcome very soon, allowing the Docklands to return to order. Hobbert then realized that Kay had dealt with Lan Wuxi, and this was the official Beander handling the aftermath. He had been so busy recently that he had almost forgotten about Kay and hadn't had time to participate in this operation. However, there was no risk in this operation, and letting Kay take revenge himself would make him feel better. He put down the newspaper and finished breakfast. Hobbert used the method he granted himself to bring one of the black iron pieces that ancient death god often stepped on from the country of disorder into the real world. He put it into a cloth bag he had prepared earlier, and Hobbert, carrying the cloth bag, arrived at the law firm. Today was Sunday, and only a few lawyers were working overtime or on duty, so the entire office building was very deserted. Jessica and Kelly had already arrived early. Hobbert greeted them first and thanked Kelly for her return gift. He opened the door to his office and invited Jessica and Kelly in. After Jessica, who was walking last, closed the door, Hobbert placed the cloth bag on the desk, revealing the black iron inside. Kelly was immediately drawn to the black iron. This is my first time seeing such a high-grade material. Jessica also sensed the extraordinary nature of the material before them and stared at it intently. The two of them looked at it for 2 or 3 minutes before Kelly asked, "What kind of weapon do you want to forge?" Such good material would definitely be able to forge a weapon with very good extraordinary effects. "I've drawn the blueprint." Hobbert took out the blueprint he had drawn in advance. It was an equally wide, straight-backed saber that looked a bit like a sword, but it was sharpened on one side, with a blade structure at the tip, clearly different from a sword tip. For the first time today, Kelly had a slight doubt about her knowledge. I've never seen this kind of saber." "What is it called?" "Tang Dao," Hobbert replied. "What a strange pronunciation." "It's an elf word," Hobbert casually explained. "It's an ancient weapon." Hobbert had carefully considered the weapon he wanted to forge. Based on the characteristics of the Black Emperor pathway, a saber that could charge directly or a two-handed sword would be most suitable. He had also consulted relevant materials and found that the weapons of the North Continent countries did not have a style suitable for him. They were either too large and inconvenient to carry, or they lacked any imposing presence. So he decided to simply forge a Tang Dao that he had seen in the Ad era. A two-handed sword would also work, as it had considerable power and looked very formidable. However, it was too long and inconvenient to carry. Hobbert remembered that in the novels he had read in the Ad era, transmigrators usually forged Japanese swords for themselves. However, Hobbert, who had knowledge in this area, knew that the prototype of the Japanese sword was the Tang Dao. Later, the Japanese improved the blade to be curved. They said it was more in line with mechanical structure or something, but in reality, it was because they were too short, and a straight sword was difficult to draw. In ancient Japan, if two samurai dueled without using Japanese swords, they might have to leave time for drawing their swords, and perhaps even ask their opponent or the audience to help hold the scabbard while drawing the sword. That scene is beautiful to imagine. For Hobbert, in terms of the weapon's imposing presence and aesthetics, the Tang Dao was the first choice, and it could be disguised as a slightly longer cane for easy carrying. When Kelly heard Hobbert's explanation, she suddenly felt like she had gained a lot of knowledge. This material should be able to make 3 Tang Dao. "Do you want to use it all?" Hobbert was stunned, realizing it could make so many. He immediately said, "No, also make me a longsword, but I want to make some modifications to the blade and hilt." Kelly was familiar with longswords. She casually drew a sketch of a longsword and asked Hobbert where modifications were needed. After discussing the design issues of the Tang Dao and the two-handed sword, Hobbert asked, "What kind of reward do you hope to receive?" Kelly said, Jessica often tells me about your deeds, especially the case the day before yesterday, which proves that you are a trustworthy gentleman. And the material on the table also proves that you are a powerful Beander. Hobbert smiled. You don't need to flatter me so much. If it's within my capabilities, I will definitely help. It's like this, Kelly said, as you know, wild artisan are rare, so a mysterious extraordinary organization approached me, hoping we would join them. Although the conditions they offered are very generous, I don't particularly like the atmosphere of extraordinary organizations. I prefer to maintain the status quo. But my pathway currently doesn't have too many extraordinary abilities that can be used in combat, and Jessica's strength is a bit weak, so I haven't dared to directly refuse them. I want to ask you to protect me, so I can have the confidence to refuse. Because Hobbert had a rear admiral for a father, he had the confidence to cooperate with official Beyonders. Most wild Beyonders didn't have such opportunities because official Beyonders treated wild Beyonders with a capture on sight policy. Therefore, if one wanted to cooperate with them, they first had to prove their usefulness to the official Beyonders while hiding their identity as a wild Beyonder. Only then could they become informants or external personnel. There were also some Beyonders, like Kelly, whose purpose in becoming a Beyonder might have been to escape this secular society, so they had no intention of cooperating with official Beyonders. Such a life was indeed free and unrestrained, but as Kelly's predicament showed, when faced with recruitment from unofficial extraordinary organizations, they lacked even the confidence and power to refuse. Because besides being Beyonders, they were also walking extraordinary characteristics. If they refused too bluntly and incurred the resentment of those extraordinary organizations, they might very well turn into extraordinary characteristics. It could be said that the law of extraordinary characteristics made the entire extraordinary world so cruel. Hobbert asked, what is the opponent's strength? Kelly replied, they are a team. From my observation, there is one sequence 6, one sequence 7, and two sequence 8s. What sequence path are the Beyonders on? The sequence 7 seems to be a Beyonder from the death pathway. Among the two sequence 8s, one is a provoker. The others still need to be confirmed. Hobbert was stunned. It sounded like a motley crew. For him, as long as they weren't Beyonders from the Black Emperor or Judge pathways, it was fine, because those might very well be people from the Tamara family. Hobbert asked again, what organization is the other party from? Kelly shook her head, I don't know. I only heard that they have developed quite a few members in Dissy County and South Wales County in recent years, but I haven't found out the name of their organization. I had a transaction with one of their members before, which is why they targeted me. Does the opponent have any sealed artifacts? None. Kelly's answer was decisive. Hobbert pondered for a moment, if they only have these 4 members, I probably won't even need to find more help. This wasn't Hobbert being arrogant. With so many magical items in his possession, a sequence 6 might not even be his match, let alone a sequence 7. Once he was equipped with a knife, his close combat weakness would be gone. He even had the confidence to simultaneously take on a sequence 6 and a sequence 7. As for the remaining two sequence 8s, Hobbert didn't believe Kelly and Jessica couldn't handle them. However, the premise was that they didn't have any overly powerful sealed artifacts. For example, if a team from the Tamara family was equipped with a sealed artifact like the Black Glove, that could completely change the tide of battle, then Hobbert would still not be their match. However, Hobbert trusted Kelly's judgment, because the sequence 7 of the erudite pathway is called Appraiser. As long as the opponent had a sealed artifact on them, she could detect it immediately. Moreover, as long as she wore it once, she could basically know the general abilities and negative effects of the sealed artifact. Of course, an appraiser also had times when she misjudged, for example, if the opponent had a grade 1 or grade 0 sealed artifact. However, Hobbert had been an evil god for so long and still hadn't gotten a grade 1 sealed artifact. It was impossible for a sequence 6 in an extraordinary organization to carry a grade 1 sealed artifact and run around the world. Hearing Hobbert's reply, Kelly and Jessica exchanged glances. They had already realized that Hobbert was a very capable Beyonder, but they hadn't expected him to be so strong. Generally speaking, among wild Beyonders, a Sequence 6 was already considered a master. And a Sequence 5, if he was willing, would have enough influence to organize his own extraordinary organization. Hobbert added, no matter what the outcome of the negotiation, you both need to prepare to move. Kelly replied, we are already prepared for that. Moving was an old trick for all wild Beyonders. Hobbert hummed, then make the weapon for me as soon as possible. Once I get the weapon, I'll go with you to negotiate with them. The deal was thus concluded. The three chatted for a few more sentences before leaving the law firm separately. Upon returning to his residence, Hobbert enjoyed a pleasant nap, then went to the Gale herbalist shop. As he expected, by Sequence 6, auxiliary materials were already rare. The corrupted Baron potion required the blood of a dark-blooded giant beast, the sap of a Chiandali elf tree, dragon's tooth grass powder, and aged white wine. Gale did not have the blood of a dark-blooded giant beast in stock, he could only provide it to Hobbert tomorrow. The total cost of the blood and sap, 2 auxiliary materials, would be around £400. Hobbert immediately paid a £200 deposit and arranged to pick up the goods tomorrow. Dragon's tooth grass was relatively common. As for aged white wine, Hobbert returned to his home in the Queen's District and took a bottle of Christine's aged wine from the family's wine cellar. Raging Sea, Byam. Alger had been in this small room for 3 days. Of course, he didn't stand on ceremony with Byron, demanding good wine and good food for every meal. Finally, on Sunday afternoon, Byron appeared at the doorway. Alger knew that the Hell General's operation was over, and he tightened his grip on the crystal cane in his pocket, preventing Byron from double-crossing him. In fact, on the first day Alger arrived at this house, if the other party hadn't planned to kill him, the probability of a double cross was relatively low. However, Alger would certainly not relax his vigilance because of this. The operation is over, Byron said. Consider yourself sensible, kid. The information was accurate, so the general decided to pay you the price we originally agreed upon. As he spoke, he threw a small bag to Alger, which contained bundles of £10 banknotes. Alger glanced at it roughly, it should be enough for £3,000. Was the operation smooth? Byron sneered, how much are you willing to pay for that information? Alger simply asked again, can I leave now? Byron made a, please, gesture at the doorway. Alger remained vigilant until he returned to his ship. Only then did he realize that this transaction was finally over. Immediately, he sent crew members to inquire about the news and soon learned about the Hell General's operation. The next day, Monday, Hobbert worked for a morning. After having lunch at the law firm, he first went to the bank to withdraw £300 in cash, then went to the Gale herbalist shop to pick up the auxiliary materials he had ordered yesterday. On his way back, Hobbert also bought a set of beakers. Around 2:30 p.m., Hobbert returned to 192 Blanca Street, took out the death card from the country of disorder, and everything was ready, just waiting for the Tarot Club to begin. Having attended so many Tarot Club meetings, this was the first time Hobbert had been so eager. But time was just like that, the more urgent the matter, the slower it passed. Finally, at 3 o'clock, Hobbert's vision was covered by gray fog. He let out a sigh of relief, and the previous sense of urgency quietly dissipated. When the Tarot Club began, Justice Audrey, unlike usual, didn't greet everyone first but looked directly at the top. Mr. Fool, the simple task you entrusted has been completed. She deliberately stressed the word simple. The fool, Klein feigned nonchalance and smiled, I already know. Then he sighed, in such an era, in such a backland, in such an East District, Docklands, and Factory District, it truly is a breeding ground for the descent of evil gods. The hanged man was stunned, suspecting his ears were playing tricks on him. Why would a simple task be related to a breeding ground for the descent of evil gods? At this moment, the gloomy and reserved, the world, chuckled softly, indeed. Whenever I see and hear about large numbers of teenage child laborers dying young, most workers rarely living past 30 due to extreme fatigue and harsh environments, and the elderly who barely passed the initial trials but lost their jobs due to old age, lacking security, forced to wander the streets and die from hunger and cold. I don't doubt the existence of evil gods at all. They are on the ground, in the East District, Docklands, and Factory District. The World eloquently described the current situation of the people in the East District. After seeing Hobbert's actions, Klein also hoped to use his strength to bring some change to this world. However, he sadly realized that he was still an unregistered resident, and had to be careful not to expose his whereabouts, so he couldn't do anything at all. It took him a while to realize that the only thing he could do was probably tell Miss Justice these things and let her use her noble influence to support some bills that would guarantee the lives of the common people. Especially when he mentioned that people in the East District would not have a third generation, it greatly shocked Audrey, who found it hard to imagine that this was happening in Backland. After the World finished speaking, Audrey fell into deep shock, remaining silent for a long time. Emperor Hobbert was about to echo, "This is a man-eating world." Indeed, it was more tragic and desperate than the world depicted by Lu Xun. It was precisely because this world was so tragic and desperate that Hobbert was shocked when he first went to the East District. But when the words reached his lips, he felt that this sentence might expose him, so he smiled. What's even more ironic is that the higher-ups only pay attention to the misery of these common people because of evil gods. If you ask me, evil gods have tried to descend too few times, not enough to make the higher-ups determined to improve the living conditions of the people in the East District. Audrey looked at Emperor with a surprised expression. "Mr. Emperor, are you serious? That's an evil god." Hobbert, however, smiled. "Believe me, Miss Justice, if you go and see, you will find that sometimes becoming a sacrifice to an evil god is not the most tragic thing in this world." Audrey remained silent for a few more seconds before saying, I will go and see." She paused and then sincerely thanked him. "Thank you, Mr. Fool, thank you for saving Backland. Your sigh also made me understand the root of the problem. And thank you, Mr. Emperor and Mr. the World, you have let me know many things I didn't understand before." Hobbert smiled meaningfully and said, "I hope justice doesn't become a burden to you." Audrey nodded thoughtfully. Derek, the son, seemed to have been in an offline state all along. His motionless appearance was not a still image but rather him listening intently. Saved Backland. Alger was surprised again. How big of a deal was this? At this moment, Alger felt the fool's gaze. He immediately understood and quickly materialized the last overdue page of Rosal's diary. Next was Mr. Fool's reading time. He cast his gaze on the diary in his hand. January 16th, the taste of a witch is really good. Klein's mouth twitched slightly, unsure what expression to make. Great Emperor, I underestimated you before. During Mr. Fool's reading time, Audrey calmed herself down and returned to her spectator state. Then she noticed that whether it was Mr. Emperor, Mr. Hanged Man, or Mr. Sun, they all seemed to have something to say, clearly having experienced some stories in the past week. I really look forward to an extraordinary life as free as theirs, Audrey thought, letting her mind wander. You may begin to communicate. Mr. Fool's reading time ended. Hobbert spoke first. Respected Mr. Fool, I have collected an item that I believe you will be very interested in. Klein asked in a calm tone, what did you collect? Please allow me to materialize part of its information. Hobbert smiled, deliberately misleadingly. I think one of your purposes in collecting Emperor Rosal's diary should be for it. Audrey was slightly surprised again, almost unable to maintain her spectator state. What remarkable thing did Mr. Emperor collect? Alger also showed sufficient surprise. Emperor can actually collect something that Mr. Fool is interested in. What would a deity be interested in? Derek finally came out of his offline state. He was very curious about what Mr. Emperor had collected, and he wondered if there was anything like it in the God-forsaken land. If there was, he would have a way to please the fool. After obtaining Klein's consent, Hobbert materialized the death card. When Klein held the death card in his hand, he couldn't help but show a surprised expression. It wasn't that he was scared by the lifeless image of Rosal on the Blasphemy card, but rather that one of the diary entries he read today was Rosal saying he was going to create a set of Blasphemy cards containing the mysteries of deities. He didn't expect to see the death card among them right after reading the diary. Under his gaze, the death card became three-dimensional, revealing some content. Sequence 9, Corpse Collector. He flipped page after page, stopping abruptly when he reached sequence 6. Although Audrey couldn't see Mr. Fool's surprised expression due to the gray fog's concealment, she still sensed the solemnity Mr. Fool displayed from his body language. Audrey was somewhat shocked. Mr. Fool was really interested in that small card. Alger didn't dare to look at Mr. Fool, not even with a sidelong glance, but Mr. Fool's silence for several seconds after getting the card already explained everything. Emperor really went all out to digest the potion. He even sacrificed something that could make a deity silent. Derek, on the other hand, was a little disappointed. Although he couldn't clearly see what Mr. Emperor had found, he knew that there was no such thing in the God-forsaken land. Klein was silent for about 6 or 7 seconds before speaking to Hobbert. You can proceed with the second bribe. Although they had already guessed the outcome, Alger and Audrey couldn't help but be somewhat surprised. Mr. Fool was very satisfied with the sacrifice Emperor had collected. Hobbert smiled. All right, Mr. the Fool, I will immediately bribe once the gathering ends. What do you want from me? Klein asked. Hobbert said, still some extraordinary knowledge. He knew that Kay could not offer anything but knowledge at the moment. Hobbert smiled. However, this time, only I can hear that knowledge. Audrey quickly raised her hand. Respected Mr. the Fool, can we do this? Let's take a short break, and after Mr. Hobbert completes the sacrifice, we will continue the Tarot Club. In that case, she could also listen to the extraordinary knowledge that Mr. the Fool would impart when responding to Mr. Hobbert's bribe. Alger said nothing, but his expression showed he also agreed with Audrey's idea. Derek looked eagerly at Mr. the Fool, his thoughts already self-evident. Hobbert chuckled, we can even take a break. Of course, Audrey said seriously, important meetings usually have breaks. All right, Hobbert said, Mr. the Fool, please make the final decision. I don't mind other members listening in. To maintain the identity of the Fool, Klein was initially going to refuse, but seeing the gazes of Justice, Hanged Man, and the Sun, Klein decided to put on a show. He manipulated the world and said, your thoughts are a great disrespect to Mr. the Fool. Justice, and the others, who were already a bit uneasy, were about to get up and apologize, but Klein, as the Fool, spoke first. It's all right. Since this is everyone's expectation, let's take a break. The world said, your generosity far exceeds my imagination. Audrey and Alger also praised Mr. the Fool's generosity and promised that there would be no next time. Hobbert almost covered his face. How could he even flatter himself? Then he wondered if Klein would be so embarrassed that he'd dig out another giant's hull if he ever found out that someone in the Tarot Club knew that the world was the Fool's alt account. After agreeing to resume the gathering in 2 minutes, the Tarot Club entered its first ever break. Hobbert returned to his bedroom, lit the candle he had prepared earlier, drew the symbol representing the Fool, and quickly set up the altar. Then he began to recite the sacrificial words. Oh, the Fool, who does not belong to this era. I offer you a death card, and I pray that you will tell us some extraordinary knowledge. Before Hobbert's eyes, a magnificent hall appeared, and in the depths of the hall, a towering figure said, you may. The candle flame representing the Fool suddenly grew larger and taller until a phantom door appeared. A strong wind suddenly swept through the room, carrying the death card into the phantom door. The gale disappeared, the flame returned to normal, and the sacrificial ritual ended. Hobbert quietly waited to be pulled back to the gray fog above. Just then, he actually felt the digestion of the potion. Whoosh! There seemed to be a breaking sound in the illusion, and the briber potion had actually been digested. Hobbert realized that as long as the object of sacrifice agreed to his request, the process of bribe was complete. At this moment, his vision was covered by the gray fog, and he returned to the Giants' Hall. Audrey, Alger, and Derek also returned together. They all simultaneously saw the card on the corner of the table in front of Mr. the Fool, emitting a cold light. They could not clearly see the card's appearance, but they had just felt its unusual nature. At this moment, Klein said, "Since Hobbert sacrificed a blasphemy card, then I will talk about the blasphemy slate and the blasphemy card." Audrey said, "It's truly for us. I think it's also the knowledge Mr. Hobbert would want to hear." She looked at Hobbert with some uncertainty. "Yes," Hobbert said, again deliberately misleadingly, "I also just learned today that it's called a blasphemy card. I used to just call it Rosal's card." Everyone quieted down, waiting for the Fool's next words. Only, the Fool was heard saying, "You all know the blasphemy slate, but you don't know that there are two of them, nor do you know their contents." Alger felt all his pores open. "No wonder it's called the blasphemy slate, it turns out it blasphemes God." Then he became even more excited than before, the path to becoming a god. How desirable. Unfortunately, my path already has Storm of Lord, but it doesn't matter. It would be great if I could reach the level of an angel. It is said that they are also gods. What? Audrey's mind was filled with this one word, the path to becoming a god. Haven't gods always existed? Why would there be a path to becoming a god? Calming down slightly, Audrey quickly accepted this fact. In fact, she had long wondered, if Beander kept advancing, where would the end be? She had many thoughts before, but because they were too blasphemous to God, she didn't dare to think in that direction. Now with the Fool's explanation, she knew, the end of extraordinary is God. This is even more blasphemous than the most blasphemous thoughts she had before. Derek sat trembling in his seat. Impossible. How could the Almighty God, how could he? If it were anyone else who had said these words, he would have pounced on them and fought them to the death, but these words came from Mr. the Fool, another great god, which caused a violent tremor in Derek's heart. He seemed to realize something and wanted to cry bitterly. If God was once an ordinary being, then would he also have the possibility of falling? Klein gave everyone time to recover from their shock, but before they could catch their breath, he said, "Rosal saw the second blasphemy slate, so he created a set of blasphemy cards." With a figure everyone knew suddenly appearing, Audrey and the others finally felt like they were back in the real world. The information before was simply too shocking, full of an unreal sensation. Alger was not as agitated as before, only thinking, Rosal the Great hid many unimaginable secrets. He actually saw a blasphemy slate. This is the first time I feel that something from mythological stories, like a blasphemy slate, is so close to me, seemingly within reach. This made him once again marvel at the Tarot Club's high-end nature. No Beander gathering could possess such knowledge, unless it was a Holy See meeting. A Holy See meeting. That's right, isn't the Tarot Club a Holy See meeting? And I am a member of the Holy See meeting. Derek recovered from his shock and grief. I don't know who Rosal is, but if there's truly a path to godhood, I want to become the sun in the sky. Let the sunlight shine again upon the forsaken land of the gods. He also thought, the Almighty God will definitely bless and help me. That's right, he cannot have fallen. Even if he was once an ordinary living being, it's different after he became a god. A god cannot fall. This time it was Audrey's turn to be surprised. So that card is. Klein slowly said, a complete sequence. Alger then understood. This is indeed something that only gods would be interested in. Even if a god already possesses one complete sequence, he would certainly be interested in other complete sequences. But I wonder which sequence this is. Derek also thought, if it's the sun sequence, that would be wonderful. Audrey simply asked, Mr. Fool, is it the complete sequence of spectator? Klein said, no. He said, it's not your sequence. Several people thought in unison, what a pity. Hobbert rose and bowed slightly to Klein. The knowledge you revealed far exceeded my expectations and is more valuable than the offering I presented." His words were merely a commercial compliment. If these pieces of knowledge were compared individually to the death card, it would be hard to say whose value was higher. But for Klein, the death card's value would definitely be higher, because he could use it as a medium to prematurely leverage more power from Source Castle, performing many operations that only a god could accomplish. Klein smiled slightly, as if it were a trivial matter not worth mentioning. Audrey smiled at Emperor. "Congratulations, Mr. Emperor, after this bribe, your potion is completely digested." Before the Tarot Club restarted, my potion was already digested. Hobbert smiled and said, "When Mr. Fool accepted my offering and agreed to my request, the process of digestion had already begun." Audrey sincerely said, "That's truly wonderful. I didn't expect this method to have such a miraculous effect." Then she involuntarily thought, "I wonder if there's a method for quickly digesting the potion of a certain sequence in the spectator pathway." Alger's expression was a bit unnatural. He was sequence 7 when Hobbert joined the Tarot Club, and now, he is still sequence 7. Then he sighed inwardly. Having the support of an Beander family truly makes a difference. Derek didn't think so much, just purely congratulated Emperor. At this moment, the world, sitting at the lower end, suddenly asked, "Emperor, how did you know about the existence of the blasphemy cards? Can you read Rosal the Great's diary?" This was what Klein was most interested in, or rather, most concerned about. Theoretically, the mystical symbols Rosal invented could not be understood by anyone other than him, the transmigrator, but it was not impossible that someone in this world had indeed deciphered these texts. For this, Hobbert had long prepared his explanation. A friend of one of my elders knew Rosal the Great, and he mentioned the matter of the blasphemy cards. Of course, he didn't know they were blasphemy cards, he just knew there was something similar, and I found one by chance. Even if Hobbert's words were used for divination, there would be no loopholes. Rex's charlatan friend should be a high-sequence Cheritu, and people from the Cheritu family had deep cooperation with Rosal at the time, so he must have known Rosal. As for Hobbert's latter sentence, it might cause some fluctuation in divination. But it doesn't matter, it can be understood that his elder's friend was only guessing, so it was full of uncertainty, belonging to a lack of divination conditions. The reactions of the other members varied. Audrey's point of surprise was, "Knew Rosal the Great?" Hobbert nodded. "Yes, I remember Mr. Fool once said in previous gatherings that high-sequence Beyonders have very long lives." While surprised, Audrey also marveled at the wonder of the extraordinary world. Alger, on the other hand, sighed, "It's great to be born into an Beander family. There are so many resources to use, and the key is that your knowledge and channels for acquiring information are unmatched by others." Klein felt the same way. Hobbert, however, smiled and said, "Everyone, have you forgotten the curse on me? As far as I know, if my family members want to stay sane, it's difficult for them to live past 30. If you want to live longer, you can only accept the fate of being insane for the latter half of your life. Yes, you will envy my resources, but you tend to overlook the unavoidable harm this family brings to me." Klein, behind the gray fog, sighed, "This is truly, fortune is intertwined with misfortune." Alger also felt Emperor's sorrow. 30 years old, must feel like a huge mountain, pressing down on one, making it hard to breathe, and Emperor already looked to be in his 20s. Rosal the Great was right. Destiny always has two sides. Happiness and disaster are always interdependent. Derek felt a sense of empathy. Their city seemed to be cursed, and Emperor's family was also cursed. Audrey said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Emperor, for making you think of unpleasant things." Hobbert shook his head. "No need to apologize. This curse instead spurs me forward, otherwise, I would most likely remain at sequence 7 or sequence 6, a stage with many extraordinary means but not too high a risk of losing control." Alger, who had just brought up the topic, changed the subject. He said to Emperor, "I sold the information from the last gathering. It sold for a total of £3,000, and the buyer was held General Ludwig. He said, according to the agreement, you will receive a £900 share. This money greatly alleviated Alger's financial pressure, allowing him to still have the capacity to purchase the Sequence 6 Wind Blessed Potion formula. Pleasure working with you. Hobbert smiled and asked, were all the valuables on the ship plundered by Hell General? No. Alger said, I inquired, and it seems Hell General did not have too intense a conflict with the target vessel. Hanged Man continued, I heard that Hell General led his fleet to intercept the other party. Some news claims they only had a minor battle, while other news says they had an intense battle. But no matter what, after that, no pirate ever saw an Intis Republic ship on that route again. Audrey frowned and asked, Mr. Hanged Man, why is the information you receive so contradictory? This is normal, Alger explained. The information obtained under normal circumstances is always this chaotic. I need to use my own judgment to make reasonable guesses and summaries. Take this news, for example. The reason it seems so chaotic is that none of this news comes from Hell General's crew. Many people just heard it through hearsay, or saw the scene from afar. So, this information obtained from different channels needs to be sorted out by me. Alger paused and continued, in my opinion, two pieces of this information are useful, that Hell General led his fleet to intercept them, and that no one has seen an Intis Republic ship again. Next is to make reasonable guesses and fill in the missing parts. It is said that Hell General is a powerful Sequence 5. He couldn't have eliminated the Intis ship silently, because there was also a Sequence 5 on that ship. After a series of deductions, I ultimately believe that both sides should have negotiated. The Intis ship left a portion of gold, and Hell General helped them escape that sea area, or helped them hide their tracks to avoid harassment from other pirate ships. That's why Byron said, the general decided to pay you the price agreed upon. When Alger sold this information, he was selling the intelligence about all the treasures on the entire Intis ship. Clearly, Ludwell did not obtain all the treasures on the entire ship, otherwise he wouldn't have emphasized the price agreed upon. Alger's analysis opened Audrey's eyes, a very reasonable guess. I didn't expect collecting intelligence to be such a test of wisdom. Then she expressed her doubt. Another thing I didn't expect is that pirates would actually negotiate. That's a perfectly normal thing, Alger said. The higher the level of pirates, the more they tend to rely on negotiations when solving problems. Just like the annual pirate assembly, for most pirates, it's a grand event for exchanging information and conducting transactions, but for the few high-level pirates, it's a bargaining meeting to delineate their raiding areas or to prepare to deal with a certain enemy together. Audrey tried hard to imagine what the pirate assembly looked like, but for some reason, she suddenly thought of a noble ball. Both the purpose and the process seemed very similar. At this time, Hobbert echoed, I also think Mr. Hanged Man's guess pretty much restored the facts. After Sequence 5, it's difficult to eliminate an opponent one-on-one without help. Clearly, this is our common understanding, Alger added. It's estimated that in a few days, Hell General will attend, or his first mate or second mate will attend the pirate assembly. At that time, there should be accurate news about this matter. Hobbert smiled, but that news is no longer important to us. That's right, we've gotten all the money we should, Alger echoed. After the Tarot Club ends, I will pay you your 900 gold pounds share by sacrificing to the fool. Also, because I was trading this intelligence last week, I couldn't help you inquire about that sealed artifact with the travel ability. I'm also preparing to attend the pirate assembly, and I'll help you ask the seller then. Okay, I look forward to your good news. Hobbert immediately roughly calculated his assets, it might not be quite enough yet. Then Alger asked, has anyone found clues for the wind-blessed potion for me? No one spoke. Alger sighed. Now he had enough money, but the potion formula was difficult to buy for a while. After Alger finished speaking, Derek said to the world, Mr. World, I will be able to get the real roots and juice of the mist treant in the next few days. Please prepare the weapon for me. Everyone was surprised. Hobbert asked, didn't you just pass the first round of assessment? You can go out and hunt monsters so quickly. Derek smiled a little shyly. I went to help out at the workshop, and while chatting with others, someone happened to have the real roots and juice of the mist treant. If I help out for a few more days, he promised to give me these materials first, and then I'll continue to help for the next month. The people in the workshop really liked the sunlight he provided. It could be said that no one in Silver City disliked sunlight, even the faint sunlight Derek prayed for through hymns. Derek didn't have to do physical labor in the workshop, he just needed to pray for sunlight every once in a while, and the workshop's efficiency would greatly improve. The atmosphere in the workshop was usually dull, no one was willing to talk unless it was for work, but with the sunlight, laughter often echoed from the workshop. In fact, it wasn't just the workshop, the entire Silver City had this kind of atmosphere. Derek really liked this job. His original intention to become the sun was to hope that Silver City could escape darkness, to find new hope for Silver City. Whenever he heard everyone's laughter, he seemed to have already seen the hope of Silver City. The world said, I will try to find a suitable weapon for you this week. Derek nodded. Hobbert smiled, your job income is very high. You can exchange for a Sequence 7 level main material in just over a month. Derek was surprised, this is normal, because those materials are not very useful to us. This time, everyone was surprised. Silver City only had a few extraordinary pathways, and indeed many extraordinary materials were useless to them. Especially extraordinary materials at Sequence 7 and below. Main potion materials at Sequence 6 or above could barely be used as a sealed artifact, but materials at Sequence 7 and below had no very practical extraordinary effects and could only gather dust in the warehouse. Many materials worth 600 or 700 gold pounds in Backland might only be worth 10 or even a few gold pounds in their eyes. Hobbert said, it's a pity you can't use gold pounds there, otherwise I would definitely use all my savings to buy all the extraordinary materials from your place. Then I would be a rich man. Alger and the others had the same thought. Hobbert thought for a moment and asked again, what are the things that are generally needed or frequently used there? I know daily necessities are greatly needed there, but they cannot be used for transactions, because that would immediately expose your identity. Is there anything else? Something that can be used in the extraordinary world and won't expose your identity. Derek thought for a while before saying, weapons. We are relatively lacking in extraordinary weapons. The weapons used in Silver City had two sources, one from the workshop, and one from spoils of monster hunting. The weapons in the workshop were just ordinary weapons and had no extraordinary effects. There was a very small chance that captured weapons would have extraordinary effects. It was precisely because such weapons were hard to come by that Derek decided to look for a suitable weapon for himself at the Tarot Club. One more chapter. Hobbert's first thought was to establish a long-term cooperative relationship with Kelly here, and with the Sun in Silver City. He would exchange weapons with extraordinary effects for the low-sequence extraordinary materials gathering dust in their warehouse. With such a turnover, he could earn at least several times the price difference. Now, all that was missing was a stable channel for selling extraordinary materials, and Hobbert immediately thought of two options: Gale Herbalist Shop, and entrusting Apton to establish relevant channels in Connaught City. Hobbert said to the Sun, I will occasionally provide you with an extraordinary weapon and regularly exchange it for some extraordinary materials that you don't need. As long as they are extraordinary materials that you don't need and are low cost, otherwise this deal won't be worth it, because even here, weapons with extraordinary effects are quite sought after. I understand, Derek said. I also hope Silver City can get more extraordinary weapons. Hobbert smiled, then I wish us a pleasant cooperation. At this time, Alger also said, and me, I also hope to join this cooperation. Audrey joked, Mr. Sun will be the biggest middleman in the Tarot Club from now on. Everyone laughed together, but the Sun didn't quite understand what a middleman meant, but he also laughed along with the atmosphere. After these transactions were concluded, Alger promised the world, the medullary crystal of the Elven Spring and all the spinal fluid of the evil patterned Black Panther should both be available for trade at the Pirate Convention. Prepare your gold pounds, and I will pray to Mr. Fool once I have news." Klein sighed. After killing Lan Erwusi, things seemed to suddenly become smoother. The extraordinary materials for Sequence 7 might even be gathered within a week. However, a new problem arose. His current money was only enough to buy one main material. But he still manipulated the world to say in a hoarse voice, "Okay." After the Tarot Club, he needed to focus on making money. Finally, it came to the information exchange session. Audrey talked about the recent serial murders in Backland, and the son, Derek, said that it was very similar to the promotion ritual from Sequence 6 to Sequence 5 of the Demon Pathway. This intelligence greatly benefited Klein and Audrey in Backland, but Hobbert, also in Backland, was somewhat dazed. He had been quite busy after getting his own lawyer team and had only heard from Zio and Furs, with no time to pay attention to this case. Everyone chatted for a few more sentences, and Klein ended the gathering. On the raging sea, the sea was uncharacteristically calm and sunny. Alger sat in the captain's chair, staring blankly at the white clouds outside, his mind filled with Stone of Blasphemy and Blasphemy card. As he thought, his train of thought turned in another direction. He's going to be Sequence 6 very soon. Hobbert's promotion put no small amount of pressure on Alger. He was originally the highest Sequence member of the Tarot Club apart from the Fool, but now he was about to become the second. And the world, who had just joined, was also about to reach Sequence 7. Alger took a deep breath, knowing he also needed to work harder. Besides asking the Tarot Club members to find the Wind-Blessed's potion formula, he planned to explore the second location he discovered in the ruins after attending the pirate convention. However, this exploration would require more caution and more thorough preparation. In the God-forsaken land, Silver City. Derek gazed at the pitch-black ceiling, recalling the explosive information about the path to godhood. He shook his head, unwilling to dwell on it, and instead pondered the transaction proposed by Emperor. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Emperor truly had a talent for business, because Silver City genuinely needed extraordinary weapons, and many people's extraordinary materials had been sitting uselessly for decades. In Silver City's public warehouse, there were even more such materials. Derek's family once had some of these materials, but he had sold them on the black market to exchange for the main materials for a singer. If these useless materials could be exchanged for extraordinary weapons, every resident of Silver City would consider it a worthwhile deal. Then Derek began to convert the difference in extraordinary materials between the God-forsaken land and the outside world. He still didn't have much concept of gold pounds. When he had traded with Emperor before, he thought that one main material of Sequence 8 and one of Sequence 9 were worth 400 pounds, and it seemed that gold pounds couldn't buy much. But later, in his transaction with the world, one main material of Sequence 7 could be exchanged for an extraordinary weapon. At the time, he even thought the world was at a disadvantage. Fortunately, with the reminders from Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man, he didn't promise to exchange two main materials for one weapon. Through the comparison of these two transactions, Derek realized that the value of extraordinary materials in the outside world was much higher than in Silver City. He unconsciously converted them into merits. The Warrior Pathway required 110 merit points, and the Light Seeker main material he needed only required about 50 merit points. Aside from the Warrior Pathway, Sequence 8 main materials required 10 to 90 merit points. The reason for such a large price difference was that Sequence 8 main materials with continuous sequence potion formulas in Silver City were generally worth 80 or 90 merit points. And Sequence 8 main materials that no one knew what to do with weren't even worth 10 merit points. Emperor had said that a Sequence 8 main material could sell for 300 pounds in the outside world, meaning the comparison between the two sides was between 130 and 130. What Emperor wanted were those 130 materials. Derek could earn 5 merit points by patrolling around Silver City once, and 10 merit points by patrolling further away. His current merit points were already enough to repay Emperor's debt. Before, He had thought that he should give Emperor materials worth at least 40 or 50 merit points so that Emperor wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Now Derek realized that many materials in Silver City had no use or value simply because they couldn't be used. And these materials, in the outside world, were as valuable as the main materials for the warrior pathway. Understanding this, Derek had a basic understanding of the transactions that might occur in the future. He hadn't thought about the specifics of the transaction. Emperor said he wouldn't let him suffer a loss, and he certainly wouldn't. Derek got up from bed, tidied his clothes, and went out. He still had to help out at the workshop this afternoon. Backland, Minsk Street No. 15. Klein looked at the slightly foggy street outside, lost in thought. Where should he buy weapons for the son? Where should he make money? He remembered that at Old Gentleman's Eye of Wisdom gathering, there was a lady who seemed to cooperate with an artisan. He could ask her at the next gathering if she had any weapons suitable for use in Silver City. However, the weapons offered by that lady seemed to be primarily exchanged for the barbarian's potion formula. Klein sighed. If Emperor had offered me the blasphemy card of the lawyer pathway, that would have been great. As for making money, he would have to sell potion formulas. He already had the continuous potion formulas for the sun pathway, and now he also had the entire death pathway's potion formulas. He could choose to sell sequence 9 and sequence 8 of one of the sequences, which would basically be enough money for one main material. Thinking of this, he immediately went downstairs to look for a newspaper. Unfortunately, there was no Eye of Wisdom gathering tonight. However, Klein saw news about the Russell Memorial Exhibition in the newspaper. After reading so many of his diaries, he still didn't know what Emperor Rosal looked like. He decided to wait for the Eye of Wisdom gathering while also taking time to visit the Russell Memorial Exhibition, just to clear his mind. Thank you all for your monthly votes. Author didn't expect to add another chapter so soon. Backland, Queen's District, Count Hall's villa. Susie felt that it was about time, so she stood up and used her paw to open the door. Sure enough, she saw Audrey already sitting by the easel. Audrey, you look a little sad. Audrey held a pencil, but didn't draw a single stroke. Susie, I only realized today that I don't know the full scope of this world. I don't even know the full scope of Backland. No one knows, Audrey, Susie comforted. I've read some descriptions in books. This world is too vast. So vast it's beyond our imagination. Audrey smiled. That's not what I mean, Susie. I just suddenly realized that some of the information I've learned seems to have been filtered. A surprised expression appeared on Susie's dog face. Are you saying someone has been secretly observing us, manipulating the information we learn, and even controlling what books we read and what delicacies we eat through recommendations? It's not that serious, Susie, Audrey said helplessly. You shouldn't read those sensational magazines anymore. Many articles are intentionally exaggerated to attract attention. Susie extended her dog paw and scratched her head. All right, Audrey, but those poetry collections are really boring to read. Audrey smiled helplessly. Having a dog that liked to read was indeed a headache. But soon, her gaze became firm. Susie, I'm going to the East District recently. It can be arranged after the Justice League gathering. At the gathering, I can ask Mr. Hobbert what to pay attention to when going to the East District. Backland, 192 Blanca Street. Hobbert waited a few minutes and received Alger's £900 dividend, which brought his savings close to £7,500. In a few days, he might get a quote for the travel ability sealed artifact. £7,500 was still a bit insufficient, so Hobbert planned to sell the madman and werewolf extraordinary characteristics in his possession. At the same time, if Kay didn't come to him, Hobbert planned to go to Kay this week to do the task of finding Haman. Even if the reward for the task was split equally between the two, he could still earn a few £100s. Hobbert waited for a while, just in case Kay came back, and to calm himself down. Then, using his self-bestowed method, he took out the corrupted barren main material stored in the country of disorder. Setting out the set of beakers he bought on the desk, Hobbert took out all the auxiliary materials, took a deep breath, and began to concoct the potion. First was the blood of the dark-blooded giant beast. The thick blood looked a bit like strawberry jam, but its foul smell would make one lose all appetite. Then, the juice of the Chiandali elven tree was added. These juices looked a bit like milk. After being added to the dark-blooded giant beast's blood, the two immediately reacted. Without stirring, they fused together on their own, turning into a drink that looked like milk tea. Afterward came dragon's tooth grass powder and aged white wine. After all the auxiliary materials were added, a thin black mist emerged from the beaker. Without heating, the liquid in the beaker began to bubble with a gurgling sound. Hobbert sighed. It was indeed a Sequence 6 potion. Just adding the auxiliary materials made it feel like a Sequence 9 potion. Finally, it was the extraordinary characteristic of corrupted Baron, or rather, the fusion of the two main materials. It looked like a decayed black jade, surrounded by a layer of black mist, appearing somewhat magical and unreal. Upon being placed in the beaker, a drastic change immediately occurred. While more black mist erupted, the extraordinary characteristic rapidly melted. The material in the beaker seemed to boil, and larger bubbles emerged with a gurgling sound. Soon, the boiling stopped, and the bubbles also disappeared. The potion gradually solidified, turning into a jelly-like substance. Pouring the jelly-like potion into a cup, there was no residue inside the beaker. Moreover, it was softer than real jelly, changing shape immediately after being poured into the cup and settling at the bottom of the cup. Taking a deep breath, Hobbert drank the potion in one gulp. The potion seemed to have a life of its own, drilling into his stomach as soon as it entered his mouth. Boom! Hobbert's thoughts suddenly exploded. All the dirty deals he knew from his memories of 2 lives emerged from the depths of his mind. Hobbert tried to collect himself and finally managed to control the surging thoughts. At this moment, he found that his consciousness had separated from his body. At this time, his body was covered with a thin layer of black mist, his skin was turning grayish-black inch by inch, and a cunning and greedy expression was gradually appearing on his face, twisted together, making Hobbert not even recognize himself. Hobbert quickly let his consciousness sink, trying hard to control the changes in his body. At the same time, malicious thoughts appeared in his mind one by one. Expose her father's rebellion in public and in front of Zio, and mock her height. Take advantage of Furza's weakest moment after the red moon, strip her clothes, and ravage her from night till dawn. Hobbert quickly shook his head, trying to drive away this thought, but more thoughts appeared. Kidnap Tyrone, force Christine to hand over all the inheritance left by Rex. Marry Donna, kill Tyrone, and seize all of Christine's property. Hobbert was panting. For a moment, he was intoxicated by these thoughts of doing whatever he wanted, but in the end, he regained his sanity, though some thoughts continued to appear in his mind. Kidnap Audrey when she travels alone, and imprison her in the dungeon to become his slave. Subdue Klein, find a way to seize his source castle, and become a combination of the Fool and the Creator. Kill Apton and seize his property. Make Elliot sacrifice more offerings. As Hobbert gradually regained control of his body, these thoughts also became less malicious and less greedy. Finally, all the black mist around him was absorbed by his pores, and Hobbert also regained control of his expression. Gradually, Hobbert seemed to refamiliarize himself with his body, and the side effects brought by the potion gradually disappeared. Hobbert breathed a sigh of relief. He was now a corrupted Baron. Recalling the feeling just now, he felt a bit of lingering fear. No wonder promotion to Sequence 5 requires the aid of a ritual. Now I'm only promoting to Sequence 6, and even with the potion thoroughly digested, there's still such a high risk. If one were to directly promote to Sequence 5 without a ritual, failure in promotion would be the best outcome. Then he sighed. The first essential of a corrupted Baron is not to be corrupted oneself, to always be vigilant and not become malicious and insidious. Finally, he spread his spirituality and began to feel his new abilities. Hobbert radiated his spirituality, sensing the changes brought about by the corrupted Baron potion. Firstly, the 4 uses of bribe received a significant boost, increasing by about 30% overall. It is estimated that after completely digesting the corrupted Baron potion, it will increase by 50%. Then came a new skill, corrosion. This was the core skill of the corrupted Baron. It could make people within 10 meters gradually become dark-hearted and greedy, making them prone to irrational choices. It could also launch extraordinary attacks on individual or multiple enemies within the range. Hobbert sighed. It was another AoE skill. The previous AoE skill was the uncontrolled stone, but he had never found a place to use its AoE attribute because he had always avoided fighting multiple enemies at once. In addition, distortion also received a significant improvement and could now be used as an extraordinary ability. It could now distort the target's language, actions, intentions, and meaning, while simultaneously constructing an order more favorable to himself. It could also distort the target's direction and goal, meaning that without the order it could basically achieve the same effect. Hobbert suddenly thought, the distortion authority of the corrupted Baron, or rather the Black Emperor, was somewhat similar to the Fool's grafting ability. However, the Black Emperor distorted directly from the front, and the opponent would come to their senses after the battle. Whereas, grafting could happen unknowingly, and even after the battle ended, there was a high probability that the opponent would not discover their own changes. So the Fool was strange, but the Black Emperor was depicted in armor, clearly leaning towards head-on confrontation with opponents. And the way this pathway found and used loopholes was also somewhat similar to the fighting style of the error pathway. The difference was that the Black Emperor would distort or amplify loopholes, thereby making the rules more favorable to himself. Whereas error directly stole a certain order, and used its advantage of rarely being restricted by order to make the opponent lose their advantage or constantly be at a disadvantage. Hobbert jotted down these insights, knowing he must not go in the wrong direction, and must not gradually lean towards the Fool and error just because he knew their authorities. Continuing to examine his abilities, Hobbert found that his ability to find enemy or environmental loopholes had further strengthened. At the same time, his physique also had a significant improvement. Although not as strong in defense and attack as the warrior pathway, in terms of pure strength, he should be comparable to an ordinary Dawn Knight. But it was only an ordinary Dawn Knight, he couldn't compare to a talented warrior like a giant bishop. Hobbert then felt very proud of his foresight. With this physique, both the Tang sword and the great sword were excellent weapons. The only thing to be mindful of might be that he didn't have the defensive means of a Dawn Knight, so he had to be careful when charging into battle. Although he had no defensive means, he could distort the enemy's attack target to avoid injury. After knowing all his current abilities, Hobbert sighed that at Sequence 6, his overall strength had improved by a whole level compared to Sequence 7. Take the Corrupted Baron, for example. It had corrosion for sneak attacks, bribe, and distortion for confronting extraordinary abilities, and a strong physique for close quarters combat. And the lawyer pathway had always been known for its mental defense. Its previous shortcomings were now largely covered by its advantages. Hobbert recalled the sneak attack battle he had seen through Elliot, where Ruin mercenaries ambushed Forsac Empire Beyonders. No wonder the Sequence 5 participants in that battle charged at the front. Their strength was the strongest in the team, enough to disrupt the carriage formation. After a brief rest, Hobbert entered the country of disorder to see the changes within it. After sitting on the Iron Throne, Hobbert first saw a blurry figure in the pool struggling to crawl out of the water. As Hobbert grew stronger, the blurry figure also became clearer. Besides being able to clearly see his face, which was that of a handsome young man, he also appeared to be around 20 years old. This time, Hobbert found that the figure's target was the Iron Throne beneath him. The pool was too close to the Iron Throne. Hobbert sensed the range he could control, and there was a small lake within that range. Hobbert simply threw the blurry figure into the lake at the foot of the mountain, using that lake to seal this blurry figure separately. Next time he took a potion, he had to enter the country of disorder immediately. Hobbert thought, otherwise he might never be able to enter again. Hobbert did not give further thought to the identity of this blurry figure, he had basically concluded that it was Trensused. Sitting back on the Iron Throne, Hobbert felt that the range he could control had greatly expanded, and the amount of power from the country of disorder he could mobilize had also doubled. He believed that holding the Black Emperor card, pulling a water pump into the country of disorder would be no problem. Hobbert's consciousness circled his controllable territory, and suddenly, a crystal on the mountainside of another mountain caught his attention. Hobbert rose from the Iron Throne and, with a single step, arrived in front of the crystal. This crystal was the size of a desktop, black with a warm luster, as beautiful as black jade, but it had distinct edges, indeed a black crystal. Hobbert placed his hand on the crystal and immediately knew its abilities. It can make Beyonders less prone to losing control and less susceptible to being misled. It can allow one to face an angel-level murmur directly without seeing the opponent's mythical creature form. It can construct an order wall to block a portion of mental or spiritual attacks. It has a very strong anti-divination effect. It can construct a sealed extraordinary cage, sealing all extraordinary aspects within the cage. Hobbert looked at the black crystal again. This was a good thing. It already possessed the quality of Sequence 5, or even a demigod. Especially the ability to be less prone to losing control, which was something the extraordinary world dreamed of. And its ability to be less prone to being misled seemed designed for the corrupted Baron. Hobbert estimated that after becoming a corrupted Baron, he would frequently experience malicious thoughts, and he was prepared for a long-term struggle against those thoughts. But with this black crystal, confronting these thoughts would no longer be a problem. Precisely because the black crystal's abilities were so powerful, it also had negative effects. If held for more than 12 hours cumulatively, the holder will inevitably become orderly. The holder will lose all emotions, and even extraordinary powers will be sealed. The holder will become a true human, like a newborn infant. After 6 hours of rest, it can be held again. Hobbert smiled. Factory reset. However, these negative effects would have no impact on Hobbert, the owner of the country of disorder. Moreover, Hobbert could also use the black crystal as a medium to borrow a small amount of power from the country of disorder in the real world. Although he could only borrow a small amount, given the high Beyonder characteristics of the country of disorder's power, it was entirely a life-saving trump card for Hobbert. Hobbert immediately decided that he must carry some of these black crystals with him. Before deciding how to use them, the first step was naming. After a moment of thought, Hobbert named it the Order Crystal. Next, Hobbert tried to deform and separate it. He couldn't possibly carry a desktop-sized Order Crystal all over the world. Just as Hobbert had expected, the size, volume, and shape of this crystal could all be controlled by him. So, Hobbert decided that the two weapons he was about to acquire would have their hilts and handles made from Order Crystal. Hobbert separated two palm-sized Order Crystals, preparing to take them out later. Additionally, Hobbert also planned to make it into small personal items. Soon, Hobbert had an idea. Gentlemen in Backland generally regarded top hats, formal wear, canes, and pocket watches as the gentleman's four-piece set. Beyond this four-piece set, two other small items symbolized a gentleman, a wax seal stamp and a pocket watch key. When sealing a letter or signing an agreement, hot wax would typically be dripped, and while the wax was still hot, a stamp would be pressed onto it. This stamp was called a wax seal stamp. Some people designed wax seal stamps as rings or necklaces, but most gentlemen used them in the shape of a stamp and carried them personally. The purpose of a pocket watch key was not to open the pocket watch, but to wind it. Its appearance was a pencil-thick ring, with a wire-thick, 3 to 4 centimeter long metal strip below the ring. The metal strip could extend into the pocket watch, and then rotating the ring would complete the winding process. This was also one of the symbols of a gentleman. The keyring that Kelly previously gave Hobbert as a return gift, the one with the extraordinary effect of the sun sequence, was not for hanging house keys, but for hanging pocket watch keys. Gentlemen usually strung their wax seal stamps and pocket watch keys together on a keyring and hung them at their waist. Only classical pocket watches had pocket watch keys. Hobbert's pocket watch belonged to a relatively low-end type, where the winding key was on one side of the pocket watch, without a dedicated pocket watch key, which was why he had never used that keyring. However, this did not prevent him from using the order crystal to create a key for himself and hang it at his waist. So, Hobbert again deducted 2 small order crystals, transforming them into the shapes of a wax seal stamp and a pocket watch key. Immediately following this, Hobbert thought of a new use for the order crystal. It could be used to store sealed artifacts or magical items with negative effects. As long as the sealed artifact and magical item were sealed within the order crystal, they would not be considered in a state of being worn. When needed, they could simply be taken out and used. Even long-term wear was fine, as Hobbert did not need to worry about the negative effects of the order crystal. So, Hobbert again deducted 2 order crystals, transforming them into 2 small black boxes, and placed the teleportation statue and the error sequence pocket watch into the small boxes respectively. Incidentally, Hobbert named that pocket watch the dream-stealing watch. After completing all of this, less than 1/10 of the order crystal had been used. Hobbert then casually made several masks, carving the symbol representing the creator onto the forehead of each mask. He decided that when he saw Apton again in the future, he would wear a mask made of order crystal, which immediately elevated his prestige significantly. After fiddling with the order crystal, Hobbert turned his gaze to the order wood, not far away. He immediately felt that the ability of the order wood had been enhanced again. As long as he was under the canopy of the order wood, Hobbert's distortion ability would double in power, with a high probability of being able to distort the actions and targets of a sequence 5. And the uncontrolled stone also received a corresponding enhancement, its attack range becoming 3 to 8 meters, which Hobbert could adjust himself. Because Hobbert could now use the order crystal as a medium to borrow the power of the country of disorder, even when he was in the outside world, he could freely change the appearance of the order wood and the uncontrolled stone. Hobbert reached out and broke off another piece of order wood to be used later. Even without using the teleportation statue and other magical items, just relying on the order wood, uncontrolled stone, and order crystal, Hobbert felt he could walk sideways among sequence 6. After understanding his new abilities post-advancement, Hobbert left the country of disorder, and, by granting himself, brought all usable items into the real world. Returning to his room, Hobbert first found the keyring Kelly had given him, then strung the wax seal stamp and pocket watch key made of order crystal onto the keyring and hung them at his waist. Hobbert opened his pocket watch and looked. The tarot club and the advancement had kept him busy for an entire afternoon. It was already past 5 in the afternoon. He went downstairs to check, and indeed Furs had returned. The two chatted while making dinner. Suddenly, Hobbert remembered the thought he had during his advancement. He couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. Was that a thought suppressed deep within me? Hobbert subtly glanced at Furs. Her figure was indeed quite well endowed, but then Hobbert suppressed the urge to think further. Because he knew this was a thought brought about by the corrosion ability of the potion. He recalled his true feelings. The family curse had put so much pressure on him that he truly didn't have much interest or energy for romance. However, he did not rule out interacting with beautiful women, as beautiful things could always bring joy to the mind and body. Hobbert sighed again. When corrupting the minds of others, one must first prevent one's own mind from being corrupted. Around 7 in the evening, Hugh, who had been out all day, also returned. The three sat around the dining table, and Hobbert took out 3 VIP tickets for the Russell Memorial Exhibition. A friend gave these to me. Shall we go see the memorial exhibition tomorrow? Last week had been a bit busy, and Hobbert hadn't had time to demonstrate his straightforwardness to the mechanical heart. His team was now on track, so starting this week, Hobbert would have some time to himself. Furs took the tickets. Oh my goodness, they're VIP tickets. Thank you, Hobbert. I've long wanted to see that poetic man. Hobbert was momentarily unsure what expression to use in response. All right, poetry copied is still poetry. Hugh also said that he didn't have any urgent tasks recently and could go relax. After dinner, Hobbert took the order wood and order crystal he had prepared earlier and took a carriage to Jessica and Kelly's residence. According to their previous agreement, the Tang sword and greatsword were to be forged today. Kelly and Jessica lived in the factory district, where they rented a small workshop. They lived on the second floor, and the first floor was Kelly's studio. The first floor was divided into 2 rooms. The smaller front room was for reception, and Kelly worked in the larger back room. The reception room was quite tidy, clearly often cleaned by Jessica. As for the back studio, Hobbert only glanced at it before retracting his head. It was messy. Too messy. Hobbert estimated that even if a careless thief were to visit, they would give up on stealing due to a lack of space to stand. Kelly was still working with a clanging sound, and Jessica received Hobbert. She smiled and apologized. Sorry, Kelly tends to ignore everything around her when she's working. Hobbert nodded. No wonder the two of them stuck together. Jessica was currently only a sequence 9, too weak and without a way to make a living in the extraordinary world. Kelly, on the other hand, was clearly someone immersed in her own inner world. Such people easily become artists or achieve great mastery in a certain field, but at the same time, they often struggle with daily life. Thus, the two complemented each other, becoming friends who relied on each other. As Jessica spoke, she took out 2 boxes, one long and one short, from under the long table, placed them on the table, and opened them. A black Tang knife and a greatsword lay quietly in the boxes. Even without holding them, Hobbert could feel the chilling aura from both weapons, constantly exuding a terrifying sense of dread. Jessica introduced. Kelly has praised them more than once, saying these are the best materials she has ever encountered, and that these 2 weapons are her most satisfying works to date. She picked up the knife and handed it to Hobbert. Since both weapons are made from the same material, their extraordinary effects are similar. First, this Tang knife will constantly make enemies involuntarily feel fear. Those cut by it will also suffer damage to their spiritual body. Without spiritual healing, even a small cut will cause the spiritual body to gradually weaken and be damaged, leading to death. Within 3 days of injury. The more severe the opponent's injury, the faster their spiritual body will weaken. It can also block weapons materialized by extraordinary abilities and easily cause damage to armor or other defensive measures formed by extraordinary abilities. This seems to be quite effective against Beyonders of the warrior sequence. Most importantly, these abilities are permanent. Hobbert took the Tang knife in his hand. It was about 1.2 meters long, entirely black, and emitted a cold glow, seeming indestructible. He swung the Tang knife sharply, the blade cutting through the air, producing a pleasant ringing sound. Hobbert smiled and nodded, then put down the Tang knife. It feels very good. Jessica picked up the greatsword with both hands. The greatsword has a terrifying additional ability on top of the Tang knife's death. Hobbert was stunned. Death. Yes, to be more specific, it has a very small chance of directly sending the opponent's spiritual body into the underworld, which is equivalent to directly causing the opponent's death. Even relatively powerful Beyonders who suffer the death ability's strike will sustain significant damage to their spiritual body. Hobbert took the greatsword, which was more than twice as heavy as the Tang knife and had to be held with both hands. Although the probability was very small, this extraordinary ability was overbearing. He recalled videos of greatsword usage from the Ad era. He held the sword with both hands and thrust and slashed forward, also producing a dull sword clang. With the enhancement of the fighting ring, he easily mastered the use of the greatsword. Jessica, who was beside him, said, "This is the first time I've seen your method of using a longsword, but it looks very powerful." Hobbert smiled. He was quite satisfied with both weapons. "Can you help me remove the sword hilt and knife handle?" Jessica paused slightly before saying, "Yes." With that, She closed the wooden boxes and took them to the inner workshop. The clanging sound stopped, and Hobbert heard the two of them conversing. Soon, both the sword hilt and knife handle were removed. Kelly, wearing a leather apron, also came out. Her cheeks were flushed, she was drenched in sweat, and her hair was casually styled, making her look even more rugged than some young men. "Are you not satisfied with my sword hilt?" "No," Hobbert smiled, "I just found a better sword hilt." He did not avoid Kelly and Jessica. He took out the two order crystals, squeezed them casually, and the Tang knife and greatsword successively received new hilts and handles. Then Hobbert picked up the Tang knife and placed his staff on it. Hobbert used the wax seal made from the order crystal as a medium, borrowing the power of the country of disorder to deform the staff. The wooden staff seemed to come alive, wrapping around the blade, and then the crystal hilt also changed shape. The overall appearance transformed into a long staff with a black crystal pommel. Typical staffs are about 1 meter long, but the staff in Hobbert's hand had reached about 1.3 meters. It looked a bit long, but not overly obtrusive. Then he repeated the trick, transforming the order wood he had just taken from the country of disorder into a scabbard for the greatsword. Kelly and Jessica's eyes had already gone wide. Kelly exclaimed, "The extraordinary materials in your hand are far more advanced than I could have imagined." Hobbert smiled, "I can introduce Jessica to a Beander gathering. There, it might be possible to trade for very good materials, but that gathering requires secrecy, the attendees and some content cannot be revealed." The reason he so generously displayed the order wood and order crystal was that he hoped to win Kelly over. As Kelly herself said, wild artisans are rare, and anyone who sees them treats them as treasures. Hobbert was naturally no exception. Jessica immediately agreed, "I can also sell Kelly's weapons at that gathering. And by the way, acquire the barbarian potion formula she needed for herself." Hobbert casually asked, "Do you still have any extraordinary weapons?" "Yes," Jessica said, taking another wooden box from under the long table, "hurricane axe." She opened the box, "Because we're moving, we only have 2 weapons left." Hobbert saw a double-headed axe. It was entirely iron black, thick and sturdy, with sharp edges. Hobbert could feel the axe constantly radiating spirituality. "Isn't this Kay's weapon?" "Oh, it seems it hasn't been bought by Kay yet." Jessica introduced, "It can increase the user's action frequency and running speed, and has a 15% chance of causing a certain paralyzing effect on enemies, and a 5% chance of creating a lightning bolt. If used during a thunderstorm, the frequency of lightning appearing can increase to 50%. Hobbert sighed inwardly, this was truly a weapon made for Kay. Then Jessica introduced another weapon called the slow whip. Hobbert shook his head, having no desire to purchase it. As for the hurricane axe, he would leave it for Kay to complete the transaction with Kay. Hobbert asked, "When will you negotiate with that group?" "Tomorrow," Kelly said, "tomorrow evening at an abandoned workshop in the suburbs." Hobbert nodded, "I understand." Then he asked the question that had been in his heart for a long time, what's the difference between extraordinary weapons and magical items that are crafted? For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.